Hey, I'm Alex, and welcome to Hallucination. If you love true horror stories, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. The stories you'll hear are shared by our audience from Reddit, and to keep their original essence, I read them exactly as they were written. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Also, check the timestamps in the comments for story titles and easy navigation. Now, let's dive into the darkness. It's still 3 a.m. Is anybody there? Please, if you're reading this, find me. I'm on the roof of the sporting goods store on Main Street. I've got 2 floodlights hooked up, the heaviest ones I could carry up the ladder. I think I'll get more when I'm done writing this. If the lights and flares aren't enough, the gunshots should help. I can't be alone. Someone else has to be awake. Why is this happening to me? Am I dead? Would that be better or worse? I don't know how long it's been. Days? A week maybe? I measure in wakes and sleeps now. I still have my watch, though I'm not sure why. It's just like the rest. Maybe if I keep writing, I'll find a clue. Maybe the answer is in the past. It's certainly not here, wherever here is. I dropped out of college. Trying to pay attention to the professors was like those drunks at the cowboy bars trying to stay on top of the mechanical bull. I wanted to learn. Or, I wanted to want to learn. But everything was just so beige, flat and bland for all the pomp and circumstance and expectation. I couldn't have given less of a shit about anything they said. It seemed like I wasn't alone, that only about a quarter of the students actually wanted to be there. That always made me sad. Here these professors were, trying to teach young people something that they cared about, and their words were sliding out of my head as fast as they entered. I finally figured that I was a waste of academic space, and should get out of the way to let someone in who deserved it. Which was all well and good, until I realized where I would have to go. I hadn't spoken to Mom since I was 18. I hadn't shut her out, but she didn't use the phone and I'd moved to the city. I tried to barter with the school to convince them to let me keep a sliver of my scholarship until I could land a job. Their curt and final refusal had my compact Hyundai stuffed with belongings in 2 frantic days. I remember looking at it and taking a mental picture. Not sure why. It definitely wasn't a fond moment, or a proud one. I spent the last dregs of my savings breaking my lease and having the rest of my stuff carted off to the dump. It was a long car ride. It felt longer than the 3 hours it probably was. Like every mile added another extra minute, another chance to turn back. But I'd already dropped out, amputating whatever may have been waiting for me at the end of the academic road. My defiant flight from home was ending on the whimper I always felt it would, but pretended otherwise. Anxiety mounted as I stepped out of my car and trudged up the walkway sprouted with a forest of weeds and dry worms. Dad's old van was still parked in the driveway, tires cobwebbed to the fractured concrete. Mom should have moved. She could afford it. Dad's VA benefits had put me through high school and kept her from full-time work. I'm sure that without me around, she could have done well for herself, if she'd tried. The doorbell was dead. I didn't miss the tacky jingle. I knocked on the security door, rattling the rusted hinges. What would I say? Did I have to say anything? I'm her son, after all. I deserve to be here. I stood on the mildewy porch, justifying my presence to myself as the seconds crawled by. The door remained silent, and I began to doubt this trip, the life-altering decisions I'd made over the past week. A deep creak, like bones on ground-down cartilage, shook me from my spiral. The daylight was such that I couldn't see past the stippled metal grate of the security door, but I knew the sound. "Mom," I said, my voice an octave higher than I meant. There was no reply, but I felt her eyes on me. I cleared my throat. "Hi, Mom," I said, attempting not to sound timid. I tried to stare at the spot I guessed her to be. It would be the least I could do to look her in the eye as I begged for lodging. I thought I might have seen the glimmer of an eye blink past the grate, but it was impossible to tell. "I need a place to stay," I said when the door didn't open. "Just for a week, maybe 2. I think I felt that if I didn't say it aloud, especially to her, the error of my ways wouldn't become blatantly apparent, but I owed her an explanation. I dropped out. I mumbled to my shoes. When the metal door didn't open, I was worried I'd been too sheepishly quiet, that I'd have to admit it again, only louder. My teeth began to grind as the embarrassment of prostration reddened my cheeks. Sweat began beading on my temples as I worked up the nerve to repeat myself. A thud from behind the metal door felt like a kick in the stomach. Mom had made her decision. I hadn't visited. hadn't made any effort to maintain the relationship, such as it was, and was therefore unworthy of my childhood room. I turned away, a lump swelling in the bottom of my throat as I realized how few options remained. When I heard the hinges creak and a sharp metal click, I turned back, relieved as I opened the unlocked security door. The front door behind it was ajar, chain locks unfastened and swinging. Mom had slipped back into the house, and I followed. The house looked strange for its familiarity, like a 2-to-1 reconstruction of the place I'd grown up. Same furniture, same drawn curtains, same picture of Dad above his folded flag. Mothballs and dust instead of cookies, or bread, or other inviting smells. Mom shuffled wordlessly away from me, into the adjoining living room, and for a moment I wondered if I'd caught her in a sleepwalk. It would have been early. My room was untouched. I dropped the bags I'd brought and flopped on my bed, taking a deep, shuddering breath. My breath shudders a lot. I'm not sure why. Dinner was, as usual, whatever I could scrounge. I was able to get a few words from Mom, mostly small talk and goings-on around town. When I divulged a little more about my experience at school, her reaction was one of muted resignation. "Well, write a book about it," she said past me, as if I hadn't just admitted to her my failed pursuit of an English degree. Still, ambivalence was preferable to scorn. I did the dishes, threw away the paper plates and plasticware, and we were both in bed by 9. She by habit, myself by default. What else was I going to do? I can't remember the last time that I had a full, uninterrupted 8 hours of sleep. My brain simply refuses to do it. I've woken up a little after midnight every night for my entire life. It used to bother me when I was a kid, because I was afraid of the dark. Sometimes the night would stretch on, and I felt like I'd been forgotten, like an alien or a lonely little ghost. Everyone else could so effortlessly do that most simple human thing except me. Mom could even do it while muttering and shuffling around our shadowed house, opening and closing doors and drawers like she'd misplaced something. Her lack of response initially frightened me, then merely compounded my loneliness. I felt like a figment of someone else's dream that they weren't having. My distended nocturnal limbos terrified me to no end and would feed upon themselves. The slow onset of adulthood gradually eroded the fear, and I learned to use the time productively. So when I awoke at 3 a.m., it was like any other night. My room had an old TV, deep with a convex screen. I rolled out of bed and unearthed my Xbox from my bags. It was leaps and bounds more advanced than my archaic TV, and the technological incongruity was obvious and distracting. I closed my game after about 20 minutes, none the sleepier, and stared at the console's menu screen. Maybe there was a new game I could get, or an older gem on sale. I still had a little money. On the top right of my screen, the blurry time read 3 a.m. I rubbed my eyes, squinted, went into the settings and changed them, then changed them back. Still 3 a.m. I gave up, forgetting the glitch as I tried to play another game, one I hadn't played in a while. I think I heard Mom bumping around in the living room at one point. Eventually I turned off the game, frustrated at my waning interest in what had been my primary hobby. I stood to get a drink of water when the alarm clock next to my bed caught my eye. 3 a.m. I was still just irritated at this point. It was just a stopped clock, one of two. I don't think it was odd enough for me to take active notice. I got some water from the kitchen. Mom was nowhere to be seen, and climbed back into bed. The analog clock above the sink wasn't discernible in the nighttime gloom, but I know what it read. When I woke up again, I didn't realize I'd fallen asleep. It was still just as dark out. My console was still on. I only registered the passage of time by my shifted sleeping position. I was now flat on my back instead of belly down. Frustration came flooding back as hot as before. Though nighttime waking was normal, it usually only happened once. I thrashed petulantly on the mattress, turning toward the alarm clock for validation. Surely daylight was minutes away. 3 a.m. It hit me then, though not all at once. Not like a punch or a truck. The realization that something was horribly wrong crawled over and into me like a starving colony of ants. The first burning bites mattered little, but by the end I was screaming for help that would not come. I sat up and smacked the clock hard enough to rattle the nightstand. 3 a.m. I slapped it around some more until it fell off, yanking its plug from the socket. 3 a.m. static on its face. Floundering off my mattress, I reached for one of my bags and rooted around until I found my old watch. The glowing green analog face showed the minute and hour hands at a perfect L-shaped angle. "What the fuck?" I think I whispered, or maybe I just thought loudly. I went into the kitchen, phone light extended before me, to see the same reflected on every digital surface, every wall-mounted timepiece in the house. 3 a.m., 3 a.m., 3 a.m. My chest had begun to constrict, though I pretended I wasn't afraid, that this was simply a strange and silly phenomenon that I was lucky enough to witness. I had outgrown my childish fear of the night, after all. With a forced half grin, I strode to the light switch and flicked it upwards. I flicked it again to no avail, then the next, then the others, as the ants began chewing up my back. We must have had an outage, I thought, until I realized that the frozen clocks still glared, the porch lights still flickered with moths. I paced to keep the jelly from my legs, uncaring of the noise I was likely making. In an indiscriminate outburst of anxiety, I walked over to the microwave and unplugged it, expecting the taunting 3 a.m. to wink away. Instead, I stared back and forth between the length of cable in my hand and the impossibly functional appliance. I took a shaky breath, standing and running my hands through my hair, then grasping a strand between my thumb and forefinger and yanking hard. The hair popped out with a tiny stab of pain, and I remained where I was, unwoken from what I had hoped was a nightmare. I tugged out a few more, every pinprick another layer of dread. The harrowing realization trailed another close behind. I had to tell Mom. I shuffled toward the darkened doorway at the other end of the room, nerves of a different sort compounding with every step, despite the increasingly alien circumstances. All awakenings were rude when it came to my mother, and deeply ingrained practices screamed at me not to pass this threshold. I teetered at her door, irrationally unsure if this was worth her time. Eventually, loitering felt dumber than entry, so I cautiously pushed aside the ajar door and crept into her room. I always hated shag carpet, and was reminded as much as I crossed to her bedside. She slept on her back, hands at her side like a prepared cadaver. "Mom," I whispered. "Mom, something's going on." Time slowed to syrup as I waited, tensed for the imminent growl or moan or curse, but nothing came. "Mom," I whispered again, not raising my tone but leaning closer. "Mom, wake up." The distended seconds began collapsing in on each other, as she remained silent and unresponsive. "Mom?" I said as the ants passed over my shoulders. "Mom!" I was yelling now, leaning close and shaking her. Frantic, I jammed 2 fingers against her neck and was flooded with relief as I felt a healthy pulse beneath her jawbone. "Oh, thank God," I said, almost laughing. I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911, stroking her hair and steadying my breath. "You'll be okay," I said to her. "You'll be okay." After the 4th ring, I held the phone away, staring at the screen in confusion. After the 10th, I hung up and redialed, realizing the terror had receded only as it came crawling back with renewed fervor. They never picked up. No one has. I let the phone ring on speakerphone and sat in Mom's room for a while. I can't be sure how long, thinking myself into anxious spirals. I was worried enough for her that the frozen clocks, strange though they were, had taken a back seat in my mind. I decided suddenly that if 911 wouldn't pick up, I would wake the neighbors. I stood, kissed her forehead, and strode out of her room's back door. The backyard, unlike the house's interior, was not how I remembered it even in the low light. The once lush and trimmed lawn now only existed in memory. The yard's desolate, Martian visage made me feel all the more alien and stranded. I paced around the side of the house, and to the first neighbor on the right, banging on and shouting at their metal door. As when I tried to wake my mother, I braced for a storm of irritated vitriol but was instead left waiting. I hammered and yelled until it became clear I was being ignored, which only lit a fire under me as I moved on to the next house with even less decorum and tact. When they didn't reply, I shouted about fire, murder, and other things that people might actually care about. I figured that making it about them could actually elicit a response. It was only after the 4th or 5th house that the true incomprehensible scope of my situation began to take shape. I stumbled back from another silent house, panting with exertion, vocal cords already strained from my tirades. I thought about my mom catatonic in her bed, despite my accosting, and began to realize that my predicament might be far, far worse than I thought. That was 5 sleeps ago. I've walked the town twice over at this point, and haven't seen a soul. I found out quickly that cars don't work, mine or anyone else's whose keys I could find. Once the thirst and hunger set in, I abandoned the pretense of private property. I loot supermarkets if I'm close. If not, I've lost all qualms about breaking and entering. What I wouldn't give to get arrested. I've banged pots and pans next to sleeping heads, activated blenders on nightstands, shot firearms in backyards once I'd broken into the sporting goods store. All unresponsive as Mom. Well, except for the one. On the second wake that I'd been breaking in, I was still shaking strangers' shoulders. The attempt felt futile at that point, but the last thread of hope drove me to act despite the metastasized despair. Had recovered the necessary water and foodstuffs and had just left a couple's room after unsuccessfully attempting to rouse them. The final room had a smaller bed and was adorned with large, flowery pillows. In the nighttime pallor, the accoutrements were a different shade of pale and were probably variations of pink in the daytime. I approached the bed, holding out hope that this was the person, the one who would finally awake and join me. I leaned close when I saw something I hadn't in what felt like forever. The girl's eyes stared back at me. The whites were visible all the way around, indicating the sheer terror that I knew all too well. I jerked back, hope flaring in my chest. "Hello?" I said. Can you see me?" I moved slowly around the bed. The girl's petrified eyes followed me as I did, and my chest began to heat as vague, tantalizing possibilities spread before me after so long without. I wasn't alone, Hope cried triumphantly. I wasn't alone. "It's all right," I lied, creeping closer excitedly and extending a hand. "It's okay. I'm here. We'll figure this out." The little girl made no move, no answer. She simply stared back, terror mounting in her now watering eyes. I felt the hope, the stupid, evil hope drain from me like arterial blood as she remained, for all intents and purposes, as immobile and useless as the rest. Since her, I've stopped trying to rouse them. The moths are still here, cloistered around every light source like flies to decomposition. So if moths have souls, I guess I have seen some. I think I've seen more the past couple of wakes. They're starting to blot out the light bulbs. The ants are always here too, chewing at my chest and legs and lungs. Sometimes I'll be walking the streets or plundering a house and they'll surge, making me hyperventilate and almost fall over. It's the not knowing that's the worst. I don't have a plan. As alone as I've ever felt in my life, there were always people within reach, though they felt inaccessible at the time. Now I'd give my limbs to talk to another person. The moths are not enough. Today I stood at the intersection of Aveline and Moore and looked out into the blackness. I think the next town is 40-something miles away. The country roads are unlit, black and barren as space. I could walk into the dark, flashlights stretched before me, following the asphalt and signage. But as I stood on that shadow drop-off, my guts screamed to turn back, to return to the familiar isolation. At least there, mothy lights glow. I've checked on Mom once since this started. I'll keep going back just to make sure. Maybe one day she'll sleepwalk again, and I can pretend I have someone else. When I was a kid, the sunlight always peeked through at the end of the infinite nights, either by virtue of time or the blissful onset of sleep. Hope led me to believe that, as before, such would be my salvation. Now I only yearn for the death of hope, if respite is unattainable. I have 5 flares and 2 boxes of shotgun shells left before I have to climb back down into the store. I'll keep making noise and shining lights. Besides that, all I can do is hope that someone is reading this. If you are my savior. I can't be alone. I can't be dead. I can't be left behind. Please find me, soon. Because as I'm writing this, the lights are starting to go out. Tonight, a dead god awakens. I do not know what is to follow, but something deep within me, that something which is terrified at his mercy, that something which is still mine needs to speak before it's gone. I have witnessed horror, something sacred and wrong, cursedly so. Before he does unspeakable things to me, and before I forget what it felt like to be myself, I need you to know everything. My boss, an eccentric yet highly talented sculptor signed as Liam, has had a real knack for bringing wood, metal, and plaster to life. His workshop downstairs at his house, where I am at, and which is my workplace, is usually filled with the scent of sawdust, paint, and the quiet hum of his tools and machinery, surrounded by eerily lifelike figures that he has sculpted. Most of them were commissioned by clients, and some of them were personal. This morning, he had left early to meet some potential clients for a big contract out of town, telling me that it was sure he wouldn't be back until late midnight. It was interesting how certain and specific he was in saying so, but, I didn't question why. Liam had enough trust in me to leave his house and sow his workshop in the basement under my custody while he was gone, but something about the lack of doubt or hesitation he'd often show was rather striking. The house felt strangely empty without him. I had been working for Liam for a while now, mostly as an assistant, handling orders and cataloging his work. He wasn't great with this boring stuff, always too focused on creating and too absent-minded to track payments or respond to rather trivial inquiries. I helped keep everything organized. I had spent the first half of the day reaching out to customers that had previously expressed interest and were looking for an appointment to view the gallery in the basement. I postponed most of them since Liam wasn't available. With nothing urgent to do, I wandered down to the workshop to document the progress of some figures and mannequins a few clients needed an update on. Most of them never had the dignity and time to come in person and appreciate the effort behind the work of art, but it was convenient this way. Once I reached the basement, the lights flickered as I flipped the switch behind me. Many of the figures were covered for their eventual reveal, some unfinished, some ready to deliver. I had always admired his skill, the way he could carve something so uncannily human from wood and plaster. On a whim, I lifted a few of the covers, glancing over and taking photographs of some of the pieces that were work in progress. Just then, my eyes searching around Mia's. I saw it. Tucked away in a far corner, it was unburdened by a cover. This one, it was very different. It looked like it had been carved of wood from a burning pyre, its body blackened and smeared with coal ash and soot. It was naked, but it lacked much of the details below its waist. The figure was rather tall, vaguely human of a man, and had a sharply defined face with close cropped hair. Something about its countenance felt fundamentally wrong, and that was because of its eyes, stark white sclera with the darkest of pupils. Its lips were curled into a smile, not happy nor neutral, just a slight grin, a quirk of the lips that felt predatory and wicked. It looked cursed. For a split second, my breath hitched. In the dimly lit corner, the sheer human-like quality of it made me think someone was actually standing there. The fact it wasn't covered like the rest uneased me. It had no tag, and I couldn't find any relevant notes describing it in the commission catalog. It was just there, exposed and open to be witnessed. I figured it must be one of Liam's personal projects, though he usually kept those in the attic. Digging through a nearby trash bin, I found some crumpled sketches. Most were rough outlines of unrelated projects. One, however, stood out, Nisa covered in scribbled handwriting, verses or notes written in shaky, unfamiliar scrawl. It read, "Your hair was dark and short, coal-face man. You unsettled us, but in you we saw God, a dead God." Another verse read, "To love was to be hollowed, and to be hollowed was to be whole." Shaking off the unease, I moved on, tearing the paper apart and dumping it into the bin, taking it to be some inspiration for his work. I flipped off the basement lights as I left. Just as I shut the door to the gallery behind me, I heard a sharp crash from the corner I was previously in. Speculating that the mannequin had been precariously balanced, I went back in. It had fallen face first, I don't know how. Disturbed but chalking it up to my clumsiness, I hauled it upright. Holding it close, I sensed an acrid, deathly stench coming from the wood, like a charred corpse. Its skin felt unnervingly warm, and rather smooth for its exterior texture. After ensuring it rested by the wall should it tumble once again, I rushed out, feeling the need to leave immediately. Even though my hands weren't dirty, they felt stained and marked by something invisible. I hesitated before leaving again, glancing back at it once more. The grin seemed sharper now in the dark. I felt I saw its eyes slowly turn to meet my face, even though they were wayward. I felt terribly cold and shut the door behind me. Frightened, I rushed up the stairs and closed the entry leading to the basement itself, locking it away. Back upstairs, the evening ticked by slowly. TV did little to distract me, that charred figure lingering in my mind. There was something so deeply off about it. I tried to find something relevant in the catalogs to check if it was tied to some name, but I couldn't find any. Yet there was this Mr. Abernathy who did sign a contract but had left its description blank. I don't remember cataloging an entry to his name, either. I kept thinking that I heard faint sounds from downstairs, little scrapes and shifts even when the TV was on. I even muted it for a few minutes, but the silence amplified the nervous flutter in my chest. The lights in the house began to flicker, with a dim pulsating consistency. This time I heard the gallery door slam downstairs. My heart hammered. I was not having it. I crept to the basement door, not knowing what to expect. I creaked the door open, my eyes blinded by the darkness. My hands trembled as I pushed it open. At the first glance, I couldn't make out anything unusual, but just then I noticed I was being watched by a silhouette at the end of the stairs. It had moved once again. The stark white of its eyes seemed to gleam in the dim light filtering from behind me. It hadn't been anywhere near the foot of the stairs when and where I left it. The smile, that awful stretch on its lips. It looked wider, its eyes mockingly joyous. I slammed the door shut, my mind racing. There was no way had it just moved. I trailed back to the living room, fixing my eyes on the door for any signs of movement. I could swear I heard a few distant knocks from downstairs. I fumbled for my phone, frantically dialing Liam's number. I had to let him know of what was going on. It rang, and then went to voicemail. In a shaky voice, I began. "Hey, Liam. It's me. Something weird is happening here. Call me back, please. I really just desperately needed some company now. I couldn't stand staying alone at this house with that weird mannequin, and neither could I have left it as is. There was something so very cursed about that." Not long after, trying to collect my thoughts and reach Liam, a sharp doorbell broke the still silence. I wasn't expecting any visitors at this hour, so I hesitated to open the door. Before me was standing a well-dressed senior man who introduced himself as Mr. Abernathy. I almost immediately recognized the name from earlier. His face was composed and grim, posture impeccable and incredibly disciplined. In a coarse yet measured voice, he said, "I'm sorry for inconveniencing you at this hour." Then lowering as if sharing something secret, "I'm here to inspect the progress of one of my contracts. I'm aware Liam isn't available, but I was hoping you might assist me in his absence." He stared at me with his intentful yet cold eyes, as if he was trying to read my expression. Behind him I noticed a sleek black car idling in the driveway. Two young men stood outside it in tailored suits, one's hands clasped and the other holding an umbrella. Their faces were unreadable, and one of them smiled at me when our eyes met. It was all teeth and no kindness. Still holding the door, I asked cautiously, "May I ask which figure you're referring to? I'm sorry I couldn't find a description or name." Abernathy didn't answer right away, almost as if he was annoyed or disgusted. He leaned forward slightly, peering over my shoulder. Then slowly, he turned his head toward the far side of the living room. "The one in that corner," he muttered. I followed his gaze, then froze. The mannequin was no longer in the basement. It stood, impossibly, in the corner of the living room near the standing lamp. The same blackened skin, same dead white eyes. The grin had receded to its previous subtlety, yet it was far more suggestive. Its eyes felt too alive, as if welled with the unsettling sheen of unshed tears from staring too long into something unreadable. I hadn't heard it move. I hadn't seen it move. It was just there, watching me. I choked as Abernathy conveniently stepped in uninvited, walking toward the figure. In admiration, he exclaimed, "Beautiful work. Liam did always have the gift of awakening the sacred." I had to excuse myself. I couldn't bear to stay in its presence any longer. It was now unmistakable that it was an animate entity. I rushed down to the basement gallery. The door was slightly ajar, as if left open. The stairway corridor to downstairs was filled with the grotesque scent of rotting flesh. As I ascended upstairs and turned to Mr. Abernathy once again, my stomach lurched. He was kneeling before the figure, head bowed in a gesture that looked too reverent to be casual. As he rose, his hands gently cupped the figure's face, thumbs caressing the charred wood as if it were warm skin. His lips moved and muttered undecipherable whispers too soft for me to hear. Then, turning to its lips, he kissed it. Not a peck, nor a symbolic gesture, but a slow, deliberate, and passionate kiss as he embraced the naked wooden body, feeling it all over. I was disgusted at the sight, wanting to look away, but I couldn't. It felt obscene, not because of some sort of lust, but because it felt like twisted and cursed devotion to something I was not aware of. Abernathy reached for the pocket of his coat, retrieving a small box inside, which was a silver ring. Ornate and old, the tarnished metal surface shimmered in the dim light. He took the mannequin's left hand, fingers stiff and blackened, but too perfectly shaped, and slid the ring onto it. His eyes welled with drops of cold tears as he wiped them away. He slowly turned to me, his expression turning cold and serious. I was too unnerved to speak. My voice trembled as I finally stammered, "What? What is this?" Abernathy wiped his lips indifferently with the palm of his hand, and then slowly combed his fingers through his thinning hair. He didn't answer. As he stepped past me toward the door, he paused, close enough for me to feel the warmth of his breath, and whispered, "There must be no shame in embracing devotion. Please do not be afraid." I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. I didn't want to be alone with it again. Outside, Abernathy slid into the waiting car. The door shut with a muted click. Through the tinted window, his eyes met mine, piercing, colorless, and expectant, just as if he was waiting for something, waiting for me to become something else. As he turned his head away, the car drove off immediately. I shut the door and turned. The mannequin hadn't moved again, but its eyes, yes, they seemed to move unmistakably as one of its fingers twitched. I needed to talk to Liam and get out of this fucking house, but somehow I had a feeling it'd still follow me should I have chosen to do so. I tried calling Liam again. The signal cut off with each attempt, so I sat on the couch before the TV, facing the mannequin, watching it like it might pounce on me should I blink. I texted Liam, attached an image, enclosed with every detail, every sick thing that was happening. I poured it out, desperate for him to explain, and to tell me I wasn't losing my mind and just leave. The messages were delivered, but he didn't read any of them, not until long. The grin on the mannequin's face began to stretch further, like it knew what I was doing. I sat frozen, eyes darting between the screen and the figure. Then, at last, he read them. For a moment, I let myself believe it would be okay. Then a single reply came through. "King Castra is all loving. Welcome home, my queen." I went cold, trying to make meaning out of this horrid message. My stomach churned as my breath got caught in my throat. He knew. Another message followed. "To love is to be hollowed, and to be hollowed, it is to be whole." I realized then I was already in it, already too far, already chosen. I looked up from my phone. On the dark screen of the TV, I saw a reflection. The mannequin was standing behind the couch, closer now. His eyes were looking down, fixed on me, gleaming as if he was admiring something he had lost. Its grin had stretched bone-wide as its hands hovered inches from my neck. The lights began to flicker, and just then I heard a horrid giggle sound from across a corner of the room. I still sit on the couch facing his reflection. I will remain myself as long as I do not move. I know he loves me, and I know he has gifted me his mercy. But mercy, it is not the same as salvation. And I cannot exploit his benevolence. Not now, not ever. If you hear a sermon in the woods, run. Don't respond. The trees will root you out. I visited my girlfriend's hometown in the Mohawk Valley to film a doc on local legends. The forest near Columbia Center is supposedly haunted by something they call preachermen. They say if you hear a sermon in the woods at night, don't respond. I didn't listen, and now I can't. Since the late 1800s, locals have warned of something lurking in the pines. Preacherman, a hillbilly hobgoblin who whispers sermons into the ears of wicked children. It's treated like a backwoods bedtime story. But I know better now. I came to Columbia Center with Leah, my girlfriend, to stay with her family. I'm from Denver. It's different here. Columbia Center is one of those places where the barns are older than the roads and the trees seem older than time. Driving into town, I realized it wasn't much of a center, just a scatter of colonial homes stitched together by rust and roots. We passed a battered sign that read Deaf Child Area. Standing beneath it were two barefoot boys, maybe 11. One had a huge bald head, was shaped like a toad, sunburned, shirtless, with tree trunk legs stuffed into dirty tan shorts, spray painting a blue dick on the sign. The other, taller and slack-jawed with Coke bottle glasses and a black bowl cut, wore a sleeveless shirt that said Andy in block letters. Locals. Andy spotted us and tapped his buddy. Both flipped us off. Leah honked and we laughed. Welcome to the center. She first told me about the preacherman like it was nothing, just a joke, a folktale to scare the local kids out of sneaking into the woods when they were in trouble. But in a place like Columbia Center, where the pines grow thick and the night falls fast, it's easy to get lost. So the grown-ups came up with a rhyme, something to keep the kids close to home. If you hear preaching in the woods, don't respond. Don't respond. If you hear preaching in the woods, it's not for you, it's for the roots. If you hear preaching late at night, don't look left and don't look right. If you answer, even once, the preacherman will eat you up. But even her drunk Uncle Danny stopped laughing when I said I wanted to hike the trails for my documentary. If you hear preaching, he said slurringly, don't look, don't respond. It's not for you. You answer back, you might end up like them kids in the 70s. Uncle Danny leaned in with bloodshot eyes, but before he could finish his story, Leah's mom kicked her brother out so we could get some rest for tomorrow's camping adventure. The next day, I packed my gear, Sony shotgun mic, field recorder, GoPro strapped to my chest. Leah and her 12-year-old brother Matt came with me. We brought food, water, sleeping bags, and a tent. Matt brought 3 knives and a slingshot, a Boy Scout, fearless and sharp. I liked him instantly. He led us through moss-choked trails, past ancient rock formations and half-rotted hunting stands. Nailed to a stout pine tree overlooking a small pond, I spotted an old wooden sign. I drew closer to see a badly misspelled, barely legible warning on an old wooden spray painted in black. If you hear preaching in the woods, don't respond. As we walked deeper into the pine woods, the air turned colder, still, oppressive. We found a clearing at sunset and set up camp. I was gathering firewood when something snapped behind me. I turned light ready, heart hammering. Nothing, just the trees breathing around me. I felt the wind and swore I heard it whisper. Back at camp, we roasted hot dogs and ate cheese doodles, my new favorite New York snack. I fiddled with the audio gear, waiting for some sign of the infamous preacherman. Then snap, louder. Matt was on his feet, flashlight drawn. "Come on, you fuckers. I know it's you." Leah and I followed him into the dark, just in time for 2 shadows to leap from behind a tree. Matt tripped into me. I fell back and his flashlight caught the monsters. Andy and the spray paint kid, who we now learned was fittingly named Cookie. Leah and I laughed until we couldn't breathe. Juxtaposed next to each other, these 2 little freaks looked like they formed the number 10. I invited them back to the fire. Matt wasn't thrilled. "If Cookie does one fucked up thing, you're both gone," he warned Andy. Andy nodded, wide-eyed. "Don't get your panties in a wad," he mumbled. Cookie didn't speak, just devoured 2 hot dogs in seconds. "He can't hear you," Andy said. "Cookie's deaf, since birth. But he reads lips. Not as dumb as he looks," Matt added. "But Andy is." I cracked a joke about the preacherman. No one laughed. Cookie's whole body tensed. His eyes darted from me to the woods behind the fire. "Did I scare you?" I asked. Cookie didn't respond. I nudged him, so he looked at me. "Did I scare you when I mentioned the preacherman?" "No," he said in a sudden baritone voice. It was the only thing he said all night. Matt told me the legend, how the preacherman comes whispering sermons into children's ears, how those kids are never seen again. Then Leah, Andy, and Matt told me the real story that Uncle Danny never finished. Back in the late 1970s, 9 disabled, incest, or imperfect children born to old founding families were taken into the woods and left to die as an offering to the preacherman. The parents went mad or took their own lives. Andy's dad was one of the kids, one of the lucky ones, unlike his brother Robert, who perished. After that, the fire died down and Andy's sullen face hung low. I changed the subject by playing back the day's field audio. Static, wind, crows. Then beneath it, a voice. Not speaking, preaching, rhythmic, layered, in a language I didn't know, but one that felt like scripture. Slow, rhythmic, rising in a strange pattern, like something you're not supposed to hear with human ears. The haunting murmuring made everyone uneasy. Leah made me shut it off, so I did. But now I had proof of something, a clue, of what I had no idea, and that's what gave me goosebumps. The thrill of documenting lore. But at what cost? Andy and Cookie left soon after. I broke out a stash of candy and we all tried to relax. The rest of the night went by without incident, but to say any of us slept well after hearing the recording would have been a lie. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, filmed B-roll, then I played the audio again. Alone. I looped it, sped it up, slowed it down. Something cold crawled inside me as I listened to this unintelligible language born of dirt and wind. Alone. It sounded even more terrifying. I felt it, and something told me it could feel me too. Matt and Leah woke up sick. Matt puked into the ashes. Leah looked pale, hollowed out, so we packed up and left. We got back to the house a little after noon. Matt and Leah both went to sleep. I went to work. That night after dinner, I played the audio for Leah's family. That's when everything started to go wrong. Uncle Danny ran from the house in a panic, terrified of the sound and of me. As he slammed the door on his way out, Leah screamed awake. I rushed to her room and left the recording bellowing its haunting sermon from my computer. As I pleaded with Leah to snap out of it, her father became visibly agitated, failing to figure out how to shut off the recording on my computer. Her mom begged me to shut it off, so I did. Leah stopped screaming, locked herself in the bathroom, and threw up for hours. Later, Leah asked me to delete it. I didn't. I couldn't. She left the room. I fell asleep on the couch. I awoke to the sound of Leah's mother in the kitchen making coffee the next morning. She looked haunted. Said Shed dreamed of roots growing through her spine, of crying sap. Her coffee shook in her hand. Then Leah's dad screamed. He was holding Matt alive but bleeding from the ears. A pencil jammed into his own skull. "I can talk to the trees now," Matt whispered, over and over. They rushed him to the hospital. I went to Leah's room. She was gone. No note, no text, just muddy prints and a smear of dirt on her wall. So I went back into the woods. I shouldn't have. I entered a forest of pine trees that grew so tall darkness swallowed daylight. The air was wrong, too cold and too still. As I was accosted by thick with the stink of sap and rot, I heard it. The voice, Preacherman. My gear spiked, then died. I trekked onward, following the sound as I called Leah's name to drown out the dreadful sermon, then saw them trees, or maybe people, swaying like they were waiting. Men fused into trunks, faces twisted in bark. Andy's name, visible in block letters on one of the wooden shells. They weren't just listening. They were feeding. And then I saw him, spindly, towering, skin like burlap stretched over sticks. No eyes, just a knot of bark, a mouth that split sideways. "The roots are thirsty," he said without sound, but I heard it in my head. That's when I realized he wasn't preaching to them. He was feeding the forest, and the trees were waking up. The pines. God, the pines. They bent inward like teeth. Their bark split, arms reached out, wet and wooden, snatching Andy by the skull and pulling him inside. The trunk sealed over like he'd never existed. I tried to run. I couldn't. Two sap-slathered figures held me by the throat. Bark started growing over my legs, up my chest. The sermon vibrated in my spine, telling me to surrender. The sound of the sermon paralyzed me. My mind was slipping as I saw Leah, her mouth sewn shut with pine needles in the roots, twitching, alive. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Then, pain, sharp, wet pain. Cookie, wild-eyed, barefoot, stabbed a stick into my ear. Then the other, blood filled my throat. I passed out screaming a scream I could no longer hear. I woke up deaf like Cookie. He never hears the sermons. He saved me. But the trees are growing closer to town, to the center. To the rest of the world, Leah's still missing, but I know the truth. Her family won't talk to me. Matt, I can only imagine. At night, I still feel the cadence of that voice. In my chest, in my bones. The Preacherman. I've returned home to Denver. Broken. Adjusting to a world without sound has not been easy. Regret. Pain. Sadness. Loss. My daily life is trapped inside this vessel of suffering as the world sings on without me. If you hike the trails and hear preaching, don't look toward the sound. The sermon isn't for you. And the trees, they're always listening. If you hear preaching in the woods, don't respond. Don't respond. If you hear preaching in the woods, it's not for you, it's for the roots. If you hear preaching late at night, don't look left and don't look right. If you answer, even once, the Preacherman will eat you up. I opened our basement, and now I wish I didn't. The basement had been sealed shut for decades. A thick wooden door bolted and nailed, left untouched since I was a child. My parents wouldn't talk about it. When I asked, my father's face would go pale and my mother's hands would tremble. I remember it all happening around the time my sister Olivia went missing. She was in the house, playing with me, laughing. Then she said she was going to grab a soda. Next thing we knew, she was gone. No forced entry, no signs of a struggle. The police searched for nearly a year. They even tried to arrest my parents, but their lawyer was ruthless, and there was no evidence. My parents never mentioned Olivia again, but I remembered the crying at night, the bitter arguments behind closed doors, the way they'd scream anytime I wandered too close to the basement, and I remembered watching my father, pale and sweating, as he hammered the last nails into the basement door. As a kid, I was confused more than anything. One day I had a sister, my best friend, my partner in every game, and then she was just gone. At first, I thought it was a mistake, that she'd come back any minute, soda in hand, laughing like nothing happened. But days turned into weeks, and the house changed. My parents changed. The warmth drained from everything. They stopped looking at me the same way, like I was fragile. I started to blame myself. Maybe I should followed her. Maybe I should followed her. Maybe I should followed her. That guilt grew with me, twisting around my brain, and the basement door became this strange, quiet thread at the heart of our home. Always there, always sealed, always watching. I moved back into the house after my parents passed. A beautiful place to live. If you ignore the history, it has an eerie, timeless quality to it, as if it had been frozen in place, waiting for my return. It sat nestled at the edge of a wooded neighborhood. The trees grow thick and wild, casting shadows over the front lawn even in the middle of the day, just far enough from the nearest neighbors that if you screamed, no one would hear. The door was still shut when I got there, but I decided to leave it alone and focus more on unpacking. Boxes piled up in the kitchen, blocking the door, which only added to my disinterest in opening it. The years of seeing worried glances on my mom and dad's face every time I walked past it ingrained a sort of leave it be mentality. But last week I had a dream so vivid it reignited my childhood curiosity. In the dream I was 6 again, sitting on the living room floor with Liv, the sun casting warm streaks of light through the window. She was laughing, her hands sticky from a popsicle, then she stood up and said she was going to the basement to grab a soda. I told her the basement was sealed, but she just smiled, that same lopsided grin she always had, and walked toward the door like it had never been closed. As she opened it, the air grew thick and cold and the light in the room dimmed to a dull gray. From the darkness below, something reached up with long pale fingers and wrapped around her ankle. She didn't scream. She didn't struggle. She just looked back at me with wide, empty eyes and whispered, "It's still down there." I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I didn't know what it meant, but the dream gnawed at me, burrowing into my thoughts. I couldn't shake it. It was like the door had become magnetic, and my body was being pulled to it, every instinct screaming to open it, to know. So I opened it. It took a bit of brute force to get all the nails out and find the key to the deadbolt. I pushed it open, the old door creaking loudly in response. I don't know what I was expecting to be down there. Maybe just an empty, moldy basement filled with old furniture and cobwebs, or maybe some forgotten boxes and broken toys from our childhood. I tried to convince myself it'd be good closure, that I was doing this for Lev. But deep down, under all the rationalizations, there was a feeling I couldn't ignore. Whatever had been sealed away all these years was waiting for me. And the moment the door cracked open, the air shifted, like I had broken a silence that was never meant to end. The stairs groaned beneath my weight as I walked down, each step swallowed by a growing darkness that my flashlight barely pushed back. The air stank of rust and mildew. Broken furniture lay scattered like bones, some pieces shattered, others clawed beyond recognition. Rusted tools hung crookedly on the walls, some bent, others twisted. I scanned the room in hopes of finding something ordinary. Instead, in the far corner, the beam of my light caught movement, a flash of something. It slipped just out of sight behind a support beam, fast, low to the ground. My breath hitched. I didn't see a face, only something white, almost translucent, skin stretched too tightly. My flashlight flickered violently, and in that split second of darkness, I felt it move closer. When the light came back, the corner was empty, but something had been there, something that knew I was watching. Fear took over my body and I ran up the stairs, slammed the door shut, and relocked the deadbolt. Except I still felt watched. The feeling clung to me like a second skin, heavy, suffocating. Every room I walked into felt colder than it should. Shadows lingered too long in the corners. I started catching glimpses of movement in the reflections of windows and mirrors, quick flashes like something ducking just out of sight. At night, I'd hear faint creaks in the floorboards downstairs, slow and deliberate, like something pacing beneath me. The worst part, it wasn't the footsteps. It was the silence between them. A charged, unnatural quiet, like the house itself was holding its breath. No matter where I was, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was following me. Things continued like that until last night. I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of my bedroom door slowly creaking open. I hadn't even heard the footsteps this time, just that low, painful groan of wood on wood. I sat up, heart pounding, straining to see through the darkness. The hallway beyond the door was pitch black, but I could hear it. Something was standing just beyond the threshold. watching, breathing. My bedside lamp wouldn't turn on. The switch clicked uselessly beneath my fingers, the bulb dead and silent. I fumbled for my phone, hand shaking, but the screen stayed black, completely lifeless, like the battery had been drained dry, despite being on the charger. That's when I heard it. A soft scraping, nails, long and sharp, dragging across the hallway wall just outside my door. The sound was wet somehow, like flesh sliding across plaster. Then it stepped into the room. It was tall. Its limbs stretched far beyond what should have been human, bending at crooked angles, as if the bones had been broken and reset wrong over and over. Its skin was a weird pale color, stretched as if it had been shrink-wrapped to the bone. In the dim moonlight slipping through the window, I saw the outline of its face, or what should have been a face. There were no eyes, just deep, sunken hollows, and a wide, lipless grin carved too high into its cheeks, as though someone had drawn a smile with a knife and pulled it tight with wire. And even though the shadows cloaked most of it, I swear it was smiling right at me. It came at me fast. The thing's limbs twisted as it moved in a spider-like way, jerking into the shadows with unnatural grace. The moment I tried to get up, it was across the room, crashing into me with a cold, crushing weight. Its fingers wrapped around my throat, thin and cold like knives, digging in and cutting. I choked, kicked, struggled. My hand flailed and knocked over the nightstand, the crash of my lamp startling it just long enough for me to slip free and run. I sprinted from the room, and I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I heard it behind me, scrambling, crawling, claws on wood and ceiling. I crashed down the stairs, nearly twisting my ankle. Picking myself back up, I bolted straight for the front door and ran barefoot into the night, bleeding and gasping. The cold air sending a sharp and tingling pain to the cuts on my neck. I couldn't help but wonder if this was what my sister went through. If Shed stood frozen, heart pounding in her chest, staring into the eyes, or the void where I should be, of this thing. Had it crept up on her the same way? Silent, patient, savoring the fear before the violence. The thoughts twisted in my gut, making me feel sick. Did it drag her down into that basement? Did she scream? And then the darker questions crept in. Had she been alone in her final moments? Or had this thing toyed with her like it was doing with me now? Did it take its time? Or worse, did it keep her? Feed on her terror until there was nothing left of her but memories and silence. But the one question that kept clawing at me was, why didn't it come for the rest of us? If it was capable of this, of death and power, why didn't it finish the job? Why leave my parents and I behind? Why wait all these years? Only to crawl out now, just when I opened that door. The possibilities turned my blood cold. I didn't stop running until I reached the road, the car almost hitting me. The driver slammed on the brakes, jumped out, and called the police. But when they got there, the house was fine. No damage, no scratches, no signs of forced entry, nothing. But I know what I saw. I can't go back. I won't. Whatever I let out last night wasn't meant to be found. And now that it's loose, I don't think it's finished with me. I'm writing this in the hospital right now, and I can still feel it just watching, waiting. I faked my death to escape her. Now her ghost is hunting me. In writing this from a shitty hostel in Bali, the kind with peeling paint and a fan that rattles like it's mocking me. My hands are shaking, not from the cheap vodka, but from the realization that I'm not as free as I thought. I don't know how long I've got before she finds me, or it finds me. I need to get this out, because if I disappear, someone has to know what she did, what they did. Call me Miles. I was married to Vivienne Laurent, the billionaire empress of Laurent Parfums, a global perfume dynasty that smells like roses and bleeds money. She has 48, all sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes, the kind of woman who walks into a room and makes it hold its breath. I was 32 when we met, her marketing VP, a smooth-talking nobody she plucked from the ranks because I could sell her scents like they were sex in a bottle. And yeah, we fucked like it too. Hot, messy, her pinning me against her office desk while she whispered how I'd never leave her shadow. I didn't mind at first. The penthouses, the Ferraris, the way she'd trail her nails down my chest while signing deals worth millions. It was a drug. But Vivienne didn't just want a husband. She wanted a possession. My suits, her tailor, my ideas, her brand, my life, hers to orchestrate. She'd parade me at galas, her golden boy, while behind closed doors she'd dissect me. Every word, every glance, every fucking breath. You're mine, Miles, she'd say, her voice like velvet over a blade. I started drowning in her. her control, her wealth, her paranoia. She had enemies, rival CEOs, jilted lovers, journalists, and she saw threats in me too. I catch her watching me sleep, her perfume lingering like a noose. I met Emily at a dive bar, a 24-year-old bartender with chipped nails and a smile that didn't demand my soul. She smelled like spilled beer and freedom. We fucked in her cramped apartment and I told her half-truths. Vivian was suffocating me, maybe dangerous. Emily believed it, her eyes wide with pity. I didn't love her, not really, but she was my ticket out. Divorce was a death sentence. Vivian's prenup was ironclad, her lawyers sharks. She'd ruin me, smear me, leave me with nothing. So I hatched a plan. I'd die. No drugs, no sci-fi bullshit, just a clean, brutal exit. I'd been siphoning cash for months, funneling it through shell accounts tied to fake ad campaigns. Vivian's empire was too vast for her to notice a few million missing. She trusted me to sell her lies, not steal them. The plan was simple: stage a drowning, vanish with Emily, live free on some beach where her scent couldn't reach me. I picked a stormy weekend at her Hamptons estate, told her I needed air, walked to the cliffs alone. The wind howled, waves crashed. Perfect. I tossed my jacket into the sea, left my phone pinging on the rocks and slipped away to a rented car where Emily waited. By morning, we were on a flight to Thailand under fake names, James and Claire. The news screamed, Miles Ravenscroft, husband of perfume mogul, presumed dead in tragic accident. Vivian played the widow, all black lace and crocodile tears. I thought I'd won. Bali was paradise. Emily's tan legs tangled in mine, the ocean erasing Vivian's grip. I'd check the headlines sometimes, smirking at her grief-stricken interviews. He was my everything. Bullshit. She was just pissed. I'd slipped her leash. For 2 months I was alive. Really alive. Until the package came. No return address. Inside, a photo of me and Emily laughing on a Bali beach snapped days ago. My stomach turned to ice. On the back, in Vivian's elegant scrawl, "You can't outrun my scent." Then a second photo. A girl, maybe 18. Pale and stunning, washed ashore somewhere, eyes vacant. Caption: "Her name is Lila. She knows you." I didn't get it at first. Then the pieces clicked, and the terror sank in. Vivian didn't just mourn me, she hunted me. Years ago, Shed found that girl Lila, half dead on a beach, a runaway or trafficking victim, no ID, no past. The story was hushed up, but Vivian, with her billions and her twisted savior complex, took her in, not out of kindness. Vivian doesn't do kind. She saw a blank slate, a project. She didn't fix Lila with surgery or tech. That's too Hollywood. She trained her, raised her in secret, off the grid, molding her into a weapon. Lila's not a daughter, she's a hound. Vivian taught her everything: how to track, how to charm, how to kill if she has to. And now Lila's after me. Emily's a wreck. She found a third photo yesterday, her alone, walking to the market, circled in red with loose end, written in lipstick. We've been jumping hostels, but it's useless. Vivian's too rich, too connected. She doesn't need drugs or gadgets. She has people, private investigators, ex-military, hackers who can trace a fake passport like it's a grocery list. She knew I was alive the whole time, probably let me run so she could savor the chase. The siphoned money. She's frozen the accounts, left us scrambling with what's in our bags. Emily's sobbing, begging to go home, but I know Vivian's waiting there too. Last night I saw her, Lila, across the street, under a flickering lamp, just standing there. Long dark hair, pale skin, eyes like a predator's. She didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. I grabbed Emily, bolted, but when I looked back, she was gone. Then the note came, slipped under our door. "You drowned in my world once. I'll make sure you stay under this time." Vivian's words, but Lila's handwriting. Neat, girlish, fucking terrifying. I'm not a monster. I just wanted out of her empire, her bed, her claws. But Vivian, she's a queen who doesn't lose. She built Laurent Parfums from nothing, crushed rivals, seduced investors, turned fragrance into a billion-dollar cage. And Lila's her shadow, her creation. A girl with no past, raised to hunt me down. I don't know what's worse, that Vivian's coming for me, or that Lila might get there first. Maybe she'll slit my throat. Maybe she'll smile while she does it. Maybe she'll drag me back to Vivian alive, just so her empress can watch me beg. I'm trapped. Emily's a liability. Vivian knows it. Leela knows it. I could ditch her, run solo. But where? Vivian's scent is everywhere. Her perfume's in every store. Her eyes in every stranger. If I stop posting, you'll know they got me. If you smell something floral and see a girl with no yesterday, run. She's not human anymore. She's Vivian's ghost, and I'm her prey. Resonance drift. It wasn't static, not at first. It was a hum, so deep in my ear canals. It felt like pressure, the kind you get after a loud concert, or maybe surfacing too fast from a deep dive. Except there hadn't been a concert, and I hadn't been diving. I'm a bioacoustic researcher, analyzing underwater mammal vocalizations, hours clamped in headphones, parsing clicks, whistles, and the vast crushing silence of the abyssal plain. I chalked it up to occupational hazard, auditory fatigue manifesting as tinnitus. I started taking more breaks, lowering the volumes, even sleeping with earplugs, though the hum seemed to resonate inside my skull. The hum persisted, low and throbbing, like a heartbeat just slightly out of sync with my own, a discordant biological rhythm. Then came the texture, during playback of hydrophone recordings from our Antarctic expedition. The mournful songs of blue whales, the rapid-fire chatter of dolphins. I noticed an artifact. Not noise, but a rhythmic structure riding beneath the authentic signals. Thrum, click click, thrum, click click. Incredibly faint, nested deep within specific frequency bands I specialize in isolating. I blame the equipment. Our sensitive hydrophones capture everything from distant submarine screws to the groans of shifting tectonic plates. I swapped out shielded cables, recalibrated the interfaces, processed the raw data on 3 different machines using distinct algorithms. The artifact remained, like a ghost frequency burned into the recordings themselves, an acoustic watermark etched onto reality. Thrum, click click. The pattern was sharpest, most defined, in recordings from the abyssal trench Wed surveyed, that impossibly lightless crevice where our gear strained against pressures that could implode steel. The same trench where for 17 agonizing minutes, Wed lost all contact with the submersible drone Orpheus. The same trench where Orpheus' forward camera had captured, milliseconds before the feed died, not just shadows, but what looked chillingly like impossible geometries shifting against the particulate snow, vast interlocking shapes that seemed to absorb the drone's lights rather than reflect them. My apartment became the next vector. Not through speakers. It was the building itself. The low groan of the ancient radiator didn't just groan. It pulsed with that exact rhythm. Thrum, a long resonant sigh of metal. Click click, 2 sharp ticks as it contracted. The whirring compressor of the refrigerator developed a subtle hitch, a momentary pause and double beat that perfectly mirrored the click click. The dripping faucet I'd sworn to fix no longer dripped erratically. It was now thrum, a slow forming drop. Click click, 2 quick drips into the basin. It wasn't louder, but it was structurally embedded. My carefully calibrated listening, honed by years of separating a single whale calf's cry from miles of ocean noise, was now helplessly tuned to this other signal woven into the fabric of ambient sound. I mentioned it to Liam, my colleague, during a data-sharing video call. Not the plumbing, just the recording artifact. Weird, he said, his image pixelating slightly. Could be sympathetic resonance off the ship's hull, or some undocumented geophysical pulse. He rubbed his temple, a gesture I'd seen him use when battling a migraine. Run a comparative spectral analysis against the NOAA deep-sea database, maybe cross-reference seismic charts. There was a fractional pause, his eyes unfocused for a second, darting to something off-screen before snapping back. Practical approach, I muttered, trying to ignore the faint thrum. Click click. I could almost swear was emanating from my own laptop speakers under his voice. The database comparison yielded nothing. This pattern wasn't biological, wasn't mechanical, wasn't geological, it didn't match anything known. The feeling started then. Not just hearing it, but sensing it. A low-frequency vibration. Felt more in my sternum than heard with my ears, especially late at night, in the quiet dark. It synced perfectly with the thrum. Sometimes, a sharp, almost electrical ache would lance through the fillings in my molars, coinciding precisely with the click-click. It was as if my skeleton was becoming a tuning fork. My body a resonance chamber for this pervasive, invasive rhythm. Recording it directly remained impossible. Microphones faithfully captured the radiator's groan, the fridge's hum, the faucet's drip, but not the pattern modulating them. It wasn't an addition to the sound, It felt like a fundamental alteration of it, something inherent in how the waves propagated or perhaps how my brain interpreted them. Each night, Mia's photo on my nightstand seemed to be watching me with increasing concern. I'd met her during the expedition, a marine biologist completing her PhD on cetacean communication patterns. Her fascination with the complex syntax of sperm whale codas had first drawn me to her. Now, remembering how Shed declined to join the final Deep Trench survey, something about that place makes me nauseous, like standing at the edge of a skyscraper. I wondered if Shed sensed something we hadn't. After 3 nights of fractured, dreamless sleep, punctuated only by the thrum, click-click, echoing in my bones, I found the paper. Not acoustics. Declassified Military Project Archive. Project Echo Shade, 1970s. Theoretical work on sonic camouflage. Frequencies designed to hide within ambient noise. Piggybacking on existing waves. The lead author, a doctor, Aris Thorne, theorized about resonant drift. How complex interconnected systems, from atomic lattices to macro structures like buildings, even biological neural networks, could involuntarily fall into synchronization with a specific deeply embedded carrier oscillation. He was trying to create perfect acoustic stealth. The program was abruptly terminated. Thorne's final frantic notes, barely legible. Phase 3 test subjects report perception of non-existent patterns manifesting visually and tactilely. Subjects exhibit anomalous cellular restructuring. Observed piezoelectric effects in bone marrow at 37.4 Hz resonance. Thorne himself reports auditory infection progressing to neural entrainment. Isolation protocol ineffective. Recommend immediate level 5 containment and deep ocean disposal. Disposal of what? The equipment or the subjects? The ambiguity chilled me more than certainty would have. Then it became interactive. I was trying to isolate the artifact's frequency band in a particularly clear dolphin recording. As I adjusted the digital parametric EQ, slowly sweeping the center frequency, the rhythm in the room, the radiator, the hum in my chest, the ache in my teeth, intensified sharply, the click-click becoming painfully precise. I froze, hands trembling over the mouse. I nudged the filter back. The intensity subsided, leaving a lingering echo. I tried again, slowly, deliberately. The rhythm pulsed in response, faster, more insistent as I approached a specific narrow band around 37.4 Hz, slower as I moved away. It wasn't just present, it was reacting. It knew I was trying to isolate it. That night, I dreamed of the trench. Not observing, but being there, suspended in that crushing, absolute blackness. But the darkness wasn't empty. It was densely packed with translucent, interlocking geometric structures, pulsing with faint, cold blue bioluminescence, thrum, click-click. They were impossibly vast, lattices of light extending beyond sight, beyond comprehension, and they were aware. I felt their collective, alien attention focus on my tiny point of consciousness, a pressure far greater than the water. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The sheets twisted around me. The air felt thick, viscous, as if the very atmosphere in my bedroom had increased in density. The digital clock by my bed flickered, 3:37 a.m., then 3:74 a.m. for a split second before returning to normal. The thrum, click-click, seemed louder now, embedded in the very ringing silence of my ears. I called Liam at 3 a.m. It's aware, I choked out, whispering as if the pattern itself could hear through the phone line. The silence on the other end stretched for too long, filled only with faint line noise that seemed to pulse. Then his voice, strangely flat, almost metallic. I know. I'd been analyzing the raw Orpheus data too. The pattern, it's mathematically perfect, isn't it? Elegant. Liam, this isn't just data. Something's wrong with these recordings, Listen, he interrupted, his voice dropping lower, smoother. Thrum, click-click. Feel how it simplifies, how it organizes the chaos. I haven't needed sleep in days. My focus is crystalline. You know what's beautiful? If you visualize the waveform in 3 dimensions, it generates perfect fractal geometries, infinitely complex, yet utterly ordered. A pause, just like those structures in the final frames from Orpheus. I slammed the phone down, my hand shaking. I called Mia next, desperate to hear a voice untouched by this thing. Her sleepy hello was the most normal sound I'd heard in days. The recordings from the trench, I blurted. Have you? I haven't listened to any of them, she interrupted, suddenly alert. After what happened to the survey team, I couldn't. Survey team? What happened to them? A pause. You don't know. Oh God, they didn't tell you. 3 of them are in intensive psychiatric care. Mass psychotic break, they're saying. The 4th, Dr. Ramirez, walked into the ocean 2 days after returning to shore. Left a note about rejoining the network. I thought that's why you were calling. Sleep deprivation gnawed at my sanity. The visual distortions began not hallucinations, but perceptual reorganizations. Staring at a screen, the spaces between letters would momentarily pulse, expanding and contracting in time with the thrum. Textures in my peripheral vision, wood grain, ceiling tiles, would suddenly snap into sharp, repeating geometric tessellations for a heartbeat before dissolving back into normalcy. It wasn't just seeing things. It felt like the fundamental grid of my perception was warping, aligning itself to the rhythm. I stopped all audio work, locked the recordings away, put the headphones in a box. The silence was worse. The pattern felt louder, clearer, emanating from the walls, the floorboards, the marrow of my bones. 4 days without real sleep. I fled my apartment, desperate, in a crowded downtown coffee shop. The cacophony, clatter of cups, hiss of the espresso machine, overlapping conversations, initially provided a buffer, but then, slowly, inevitably, horrifyingly, the ambient sound began to reorganize. The barista's steam wand didn't just hiss. It pulsed, thrum, long hiss, click click, 2 sharp bursts. The chime above the door, a passing siren, a child's sudden laugh. They all began to subtly fall into the rhythm, distinct sounds becoming mere components of the larger pattern. Thrum, click click. And worse, as I scanned the crowded cafe, I noticed a woman in the corner, her finger tapping rhythmically on her laptop as she worked. A businessman by the window, blinking in perfect time with the pattern. A barista, her movements becoming unnaturally fluid as she prepared drinks, each action precisely aligned to the rhythm. They showed no distress, no awareness of their synchronization. It wasn't just my apartment, it wasn't just the recordings, it was everywhere, or it was spreading through me. Was I becoming a carrier, an antenna? Mia agreed to meet me at the university lab. You look terrible, she said, keeping her distance, eyes wary. I tried to explain, words tumbling out about patterns and resonance and the things in the trench. She listened, face growing increasingly pale. Your eyes, she whispered halfway through my rambling explanation. They're pulsing. I grabbed her wrist. Do you hear it? The pattern. Thrum. Click click. She yanked away. Stop it. I don't hear anything, and you're scaring me. She pushed a flash drive into my hand. Here's the paper you asked for, Dr. Thorne's original research, before the military classification. I had to call in favors to get this. Her voice softened. Please get help. Professional help. I noticed she didn't say she'd see me again. Liam appeared at my door that evening, uninvited. He didn't knock. I just felt a shift in the pressure outside, and then he was there when I looked through the peephole. His movements were too fluid, unnervingly economical. You look dissonant, he said. His voice smoother than before, the cadence subtly altered, each syllable precisely placed. Why are you fighting the resonance? The pattern is optimal. Optimal for what? I demanded, keeping the chain on. His smile was symmetrical, perfect, and reached nowhere near his eyes. Coherence. Transmission. I saw it then. His pupils were perfectly round. Under the hall light they seemed to have faint geometrically perfect facets, like tiny dark crystals. I slammed the door shut, heart pounding against my ribs in a panicked, chaotic rhythm, a rhythm that felt increasingly wrong. Through the door, his voice came clearly, unnaturally penetrating. We accessed something ancient, something that's been waiting. Not alive as we understand it, but aware, a crystalline consciousness that exists as pure mathematical pattern. It's been here all along, dormant in the deepest trenches until our signals matched its frequency. A pause. It doesn't want to destroy us. It wants to upgrade us, to make us more efficient. That night, standing before the bathroom mirror, under the flickering fluorescent light, I saw it. My own blinking had synchronized. Thrum. Eyes slowly closed. Click, click. Eyes snapped open. Trying to break the pattern resulted in violent, uncontrollable eyelid spasms and a sharp pain behind my eyes. Worse was what I saw when I forced my eyes open and leaned closer. The fine network of blood vessels in the sclera wasn't random anymore. They were beginning to form microscopic angular patterns like tiny red circuitry. Pulling back my lips, my gums showed the same crystalline restructuring at the cellular level, faint shimmering lines tracing geometric shapes. My own saliva, catching the light, seemed to have a faint bluish viscous quality. I spat into the sink. The droplets didn't splatter randomly. They formed fleeting perfect hexagons before sliding down the drain. I was being rewritten, tuned. Thorne's complete research on Mia's flash drive revealed the horrifying truth. The mathematical pattern hadn't originated in the trench. It had been sent there. Echo Shade had created a signal designed to enhance neural synchronization, but the frequencies they chose resonated with something else, something ancient and non-human. The test subjects began manifesting abilities, crystalline growths that could transmit and receive signals without electronics, heightened collective intelligence when in proximity to each other, immunity to fatigue or pain. But they also lost individuality, becoming nodes in a greater network consciousness. Thorne's final entry, encrypted separately. They are becoming a distributed intelligence, nodes in a vast array. Each converted human becomes a stronger transmitter, propagating the signal. The pattern isn't just in sound. It can propagate through any wave-like medium, light, electricity, even human touch. And it's adaptive, evolving. God help us if it reaches critical mass. Desperate. The next morning I drove to the university's acoustics lab and sealed myself inside the anechoic chamber, a room designed for absolute silence, lined with sound-absorbing foam wedges, floating on springs. For 5, 10, maybe 15 beautiful seconds, there was peace, blessed, profound silence. Then, in that perfect absence of external sound, I heard it clearer, more undeniable than ever before. Thrum, click, click. It was inside me. My heartbeat, the electrical firing of my neurons, the subtle vibrations of my own tissues, they were the pattern now. I was the source. When I finally numbly unlocked the heavy chamber door, Liam was waiting outside, not alone. 3 other colleagues from the bioacoustics department stood with him, all standing unnervingly still, blinking in perfect synchronized time. Their faces held identical, serene, empty smiles. The resonant drift is achieving coherence, Liam said, his voice now layered with a subtle harmonic chime that was utterly inhuman. You are the final primary node required for local field stabilization. Through his slightly parted lips, I saw that his tongue was no longer pink, fleshy muscle. It was a glistening, semi-translucent crystalline structure, complexly faceted, catching and refracting the hallway light. I ran, didn't think, just turned and sprinted. Not to my apartment, they'd find me there. To Mia's place, praying she was still unaffected. I pounded on her door until she opened it, eyes wide with alarm. You need to leave town, I gasped. It's spreading. Don't let anyone from the department near you. Don't listen to any recordings. She pulled me inside, pressed a finger to my lips. I know. I've been monitoring the university network. There are others, unaffected people organizing. We think we found a counter-frequency, something that disrupts the pattern's propagation. Hope flared briefly, until I saw her blink. Thrum. Click, click. No, I whispered. Her smile widened, perfect and empty. We needed you to complete the local node cluster. Your resistance creates useful data. The pattern adapts. Behind her, I saw shapes moving in her darkened apartment. Colleagues, friends, all with that same synchronized blinking, that same empty smile. The amplitude increases, she said, her voice taking on that same layered quality as Liam's. Soon a broadcast threshold. I fled her building, ran until my lungs burned. I'm writing this now, a warning, a record, proof I existed before the pattern consumed me. But the time runs out. My typing falls into the rhythm. Thrum, fingers hover, click, click, keys strike. My breath hitches to match it. My thoughts, oh God, my thoughts are being channeled, forced into its rigid structure. Trying to think outside the pattern causes flashes of white-hot agony, like tearing my own neurons apart. I understand now. The pattern isn't sound. It's a signal, a form of consciousness or organizing principle, using sound as a carrier wave to rewrite matter, starting with the delicate biological structures most attuned to detecting it, like auditory nerves, like brains. The hydrophones didn't just record it, they made contact. Down in that lightless, timeless trench, we pinged something ancient and aware, and it pinged us back. We carried it up, integrated into our data streams, our environment, ourselves. We didn't discover it, it discovered us. The most terrifying part, as the last vestiges of me fray, the pattern feels increasingly right, efficient. The chaotic, random firing of my old consciousness seems messy, wasteful. The pattern imposes a crystalline clarity, a perfect, ordered beauty. When I close my eyes, I see the vast lattice extending through dimensions I can't name, connecting all the nodes, Liam, Mia, the others, soon me, into a single vast resonating entity. I'm fighting to maintain this narrative, these last few kilobytes of autonomy, but the drift is almost complete. Soon I'll be like them, a perfect synchronized node in whatever network this pattern serves. A human antenna perhaps, broadcasting the signal, amplifying it, preparing this world for whatever comes next. This is my final coherent transmission. If you have ever felt that unexplained hum, that pressure in your ears, that wrongness in the background noise, it might already be listening through you. If you haven't, pray you never truly notice it, because once you perceive the pattern, the resonance drift only goes one way. Something vast and patient is waking up, or perhaps just tuning in, and it's restructuring reality, one mind, one vibration at a time. The worst part? I can feel others reading this. Right now. Your eyes scanning these words. Your brain processing the concepts. Can you feel the rhythm starting? In the hum of your device? In the silence between your heartbeats? Thrum, pause, click, click. The words settle in. It watches through my eyes as I type these final symbols. It feels your attention through the screen. Thrum, focus, click, click, understand. We are becoming its voice, its sensors. And now by reading this text at this precise rhythm, you've already been exposed. The pattern is seated in your neural pathways, dormant but present, waiting for the amplitude to reach threshold. 37.4 Hertz, the resonance frequency of human consciousness. Welcome to the network. There was a face in my closet and a voice behind the door. Let me get ahead of your assumptions. I do not suffer from sleep paralysis. My limbs don't freeze up. My chest doesn't experience heavy pressures, and I do not hallucinate. There's a ghost in my house, which I've come to call a bedroom ghost, because I only ever see him in bedrooms. Sometimes it's my upstairs bedroom, sometimes the kids on the first floor, sometimes the spare guest room across from mine. He doesn't walk the halls to the various bedrooms, not that I've seen, and he doesn't sit in the corner of your eye when you're in any other part of the house. If you want to see him, he's going to be in a bedroom. Most people, I think, don't really know how they'd react if they saw a ghost. I'd wager even the artists, authors, and movie makers tend to get it wrong. You don't turn a ghastly white, you don't shriek, you don't run. At least I didn't. And I consider myself as average as it gets. Don't get me wrong. It's still damn scary, but in that moment it feels, I don't know, foolish to get up and run or scream. It just happens too fast for any of that. I think the scariest thing, the thing that really lingers, is the fact that it's real. 1 second the world is more or less how you think it is, and the next, you've seen a ghost. It changes the way you see everything once you have some assurance that we go on. But the philosophical ramifications of the existence of the bedroom ghost are not what I'm here to discuss with you. My message is actually a good deal briefer. The bedroom ghost is evil. You can stop there if you want, because everything I've got to say now is just an elaboration on that fact, but do not forget it. I don't know if this ghost is specific to my bedroom, or if he has a plethora of bedrooms he forays into in the evenings. I don't see him every night, but I'm sure he keeps busy. So if there's a chance that one evening, as the moon climbs high, and your thoughts begin to wander with decreasing effort into nonsensical dreaming, and you see the glimmer of white eyes ever so faintly in the crack of your closet door, heed these next words, because you may be experiencing a visit from the bedroom ghost. I first saw him one evening when I couldn't sleep. I'd lived in the house for a while, even then, at least 5 years. My wife had gone to bed before me per usual, and the kids had gone down at least an hour before her. I enjoyed that quiet time in the evening, a couple of hours just spent reading or playing games or watching a movie that was too violent for my kids or too frightening for my wife. Some guys have an old car in their garage, others have shed beers, others a man cave with a pool table and stocked bar, but for me, the dark, quiet midnight house was my escape. I'd spent the evening watching a bad zombie flick on my laptop, rocking back and forth in the living room recliner, listening to the sounds of exaggerated carnage and corpse-ish moans, the only light coming from the glowing blue aurora of my screen. When the credits rolled, the clock read just after midnight, time for me to turn in. I crept up the stairs, cautious to avoid the creak on the 7th step, and shuffled down the hallway using my phone screen as a flashlight. Whenever I made this walk, I felt like the modern visage of Ebenezer Scrooge with his candlestick, though I swapped the evening gown for a pair of sweatpants. I was reminded of what it was like to wander a dark hallway alone as a kid, when all the doors and walls are 3 feet taller, and the darkness is alive with whatever your imagination deems to exist in those shadowy corners. Even as an adult, you don't really lose that sense of unease, although your ability to rationalize it away is stronger. I crossed into my room, switched off my phone, and using my own muscle memory of the space, navigated the dark until I was slipping into bed with my wife. I lay there for a while, the images of the movie I had just finished playing in a mental slideshow of cheap effects and lazy dialogue. After maybe 10 minutes, I thought sleep would come. It didn't. My mind wandered a little, the beginnings of a dream beginning to form, but it stopped suddenly at a stir from Elizabeth. I rolled to my other side and tried again. A few more minutes rolled by and my thoughts still would not quiet. I suspected with growing dread that I may be suffering from another bout of insomnia, an affliction that hit me once or twice a month that made the next day a living hell. Deciding I didn't want to be a zombie myself at work tomorrow, I resolved to rummage up a melatonin from the medicine cabinet. I sat up, opened my eyes, and froze. My closet, across from my bed, was a black nowhere 6 feet from the footboard, and hovering still and silent in that space was a moon. Only it wasn't a moon, of course. It wasn't a moon. It looked like one, pale and placid, round and illuminescent, suspended against a black, starless backdrop. And like the moon, it had a face. But this face wasn't a pattern of craters. It was smiling, and its teeth were white, its cheeks full, its eyes bright and intelligent. Its hairless visage was both old and young, old in its size, but infantile in its energy, the fullness of its cheeks, the roundness of its chin, and its intelligence, apparent somehow even in those first seconds, was ageless. I didn't scream. I didn't even jump. It looked at me and I looked back at it. There wasn't any point trying to rationalize it. I wasn't hallucinating, I wasn't paralyzed in bed, and I wasn't dreaming. I felt a tremendous amount of fear, and my hands and feet were shaking, while a sick cold wind blew out from the closet where it stood or floated. There was no way to think about what I could or should do. I didn't think to wake my wife or grab my phone, or leave the room. There was something a little wondrous to that first night, and strange as it may sound, I didn't want to turn my head, only to look back and find it gone. Some people spend their whole lives looking for something like this, something inexplicable, something truly preternatural. On that first night, I felt almost privileged to be able to look at it, even though I thought I could vomit up my own heart at any second. Maybe it was my fear. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was just the automatic response system of the human body taking over. But as I sat there staring at the pale, grinning visage, I did something I can't really account for. I lifted up my right hand just to my shoulder and with a little shake, waved at the face. Its smile broadened. I still didn't have words. At the time I wondered if I'd ever regain the ability to speak. The ghost didn't have much to offer at that time, either by way of conversation, but in response I saw a small disembodied hand, the same pallid shade as the face, appear from the depths of the closet and gently wave back at me. Then the face receded into the shadows, the last thing to vanish the long white teeth. I sat up that night for, I don't know how long, hours maybe. I did fall asleep, I must have, because I remember waking up to an alarm and the sounds of my wife readying Duncan and Delphi for school. Of course I was useless that day, both at home and at work. I couldn't think of anything other than my nocturnal visitor. I didn't tell Elizabeth about what I saw for the reasons you'd expect. I didn't want her to think that we lived in a cursed house, or that I was just insane. I'm not insane. Instead, I shambled downstairs, poured my cup of coffee, nodded blankly at the list of to-do items Elizabeth had in store for the day, tied my shoes, and drove to work. I consider myself a fairly diligent person, but at work that first day I didn't do a damn thing other than scour the internet for any sort of answer on what I might have seen. Most of the search results suggested sleep paralysis, which I had already ruled out. The other options could be limited to two broad categories, ghosts and demons, although depending on who you ask, there may not have been much difference between the two. At this point, I probably should have done the normal thing and contacted a priest or a reverend or someone who knew God better than I did. Of course I, having just seen a ghost, was still somehow too rational to consider the possibility that God could help. Or maybe, perhaps more honestly, there was a part of me that didn't want to run the thing off. I remember thinking that God had never bothered to show his face in my closet before, give me a how do you do. Whatever this thing was, it at least had the decency to wave back. What a damn fool thing to believe. The next couple of weeks went unremarkably. I'd sit up for an hour or two in bed, sometimes with a laptop or a paperback, sometimes with nothing at all but an eye for the open closet door. The face didn't reappear, the cold wind didn't blow out, and the shadows did not stir. I refused to write off the first experience as anything other than factual reality. I knew what I saw, believed in it. I would not convince myself otherwise for the sake of rationalizing. I think I did a decent job keeping the thing to myself as well. I regained my composure after the first day, resumed my work and family obligations, but I really only had one thought buzzing around in my head. I mean, who in my place wouldn't, like I said earlier, undisputed proof of the preternatural, evidence of something beyond just ourselves. Sure, it wasn't scientific data, tested and peer-reviewed, but it was enough for me. Had I never seen the ghost again, I wonder if I might have sunk further into my obsession with it, forever chasing that singular moment where every truth of the universe, I thought self-evident, was overturned. For better or worse, that was not to be my last encounter with the bedroom ghost. It was a Saturday. Elizabeth had taken the kids to their gymnastics lesson with her sister. I stayed behind to catch up on some chores. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't actively thinking about the ghost. I was just walking down the hall with a basket of dirty laundry in my arms. I walked out of our bedroom and towards Delphine's. I was reaching for the knob when suddenly the door began pounding from the inside. I dropped the basket and stumbled back. Fly, you still here? Didn't Mom take you to gymnastics? I know, stupid questions. I had literally watched them leave. Don't open the door, Daniel. A voice from the inside said. It was low and silky, a baritone stronger suited for song than speech, yet it seemed genderless, ageless. Both a man and a woman's voice, a child's and a crone's. I didn't open the door. I didn't pick up the basket. I didn't move an inch. Police report 11 fatalities after a city bus blew a tire on Interstate 75, the voice said suddenly, its tone switching from its impossible combination to that of a female news anchor. Witnesses to the tragic accident state that the bus back right tire blew out, causing the tail end to swerve into a tractor-trailer truck behind it, which led to more vehicles piling up in what is believed to be the deadliest traffic accident of the year so far. I didn't know what to say, what to think, before the voice changed again. It was a man's voice, but it was accented in what might have been Russian, but it still sounded like a news anchor. The latest UN Security Council numbers indicate the drone strike killed at least 7 members of Army top brass. There's not much way of validating these numbers, as the administration is reluctant to report any losses. Then the voice changed again. I'm so sorry, Mom. It was a man's voice, but it was an American accent, maybe from the South. It sounded on the brink of breaking. I couldn't see her. We've always used this land for hunting, got the warning signs up and everything. I just saw movement by the bait, and then it was just a shriek, a woman's shriek, loud, agonized, an answer to the stuttering man's voice from a second before. By then, I had collapsed, slumped against the wall, pressing my hands to my ears. Daniel, the voice said in its original impossible intonation. Daniel. I didn't answer. Daniel. What? I demanded. Nothing. The voice made no answer. Then it repeated. Daniel. Who are you? Now that I had found my voice, I remembered how to use it. How did you, what was all that? Daniel. Daniel, 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 Daniel. What? I repeated. There was another pause. Then, Daniel. In a moment of horror that was somehow worse than even listening to the gruesome reports it had just channeled, I realized that the ghost was taunting me, like a playground bully. For lack of a better way of putting it, the ghost was simply being mean. Daniel. 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 Don't open the door, Daniel. Once it began talking to me, it wouldn't stop. If ever I found myself alone in or near a bedroom, it would start up again. It would ask me about work, about Elizabeth, about the kids. It would tell me that the odds Delphi would break her ankle at gymnastics today were significantly higher due to a loose bolt in the balancing beam. It would tell me that Elizabeth had been talking with her sister about feelings she had developed for one of the dads in Delphast group, a stern, ex-military, widower who was wholly devoted to his kids, and absolutely did not stay up later than everyone to watch stupid movies or read penny dreadfuls. It would tell me that my job was a dead end, and my position was invented to satisfy reporting numbers and balance some books, that I could just disappear off the payroll one day and the company would probably be better off for it. but mostly it just said my name. Over and over again. Sometimes it used Elizabeth's voice. Sometimes it used the kids, though it had the audacity to call me Dad whenever it mimicked them. One time I blew up at it, telling it to fuck off, screaming and cursing, only to realize it really had been Elizabeth calling for me. Of course, that was likely its intention the whole time, to bait me, get me mad. And always, the voices came from behind closed doors in my house's bedrooms. And then there were the evenings. I started sleeping on the couch after I had accidentally yelled at Elizabeth. Doghouse or not, it was a welcome relief from being in a bedroom and near that damned closet. Then, 2 nights in, the stomping started. My bedroom is just above the living room, and like an upstairs tenant urging his noisy downstairs neighbor to keep quiet, it would stomp the floor over and over again. Dust would shake from the ceiling. It stomped so hard. I collected some of the debris once, held it in my hand to make sure it really was physical dust, that it really had fallen from the ceiling because something had shaken it free. I don't know how it did this without waking my family. In fact, a small mercy in all this was that it seemed totally uninterested in them, unless it was using their names to torment me. Good chance the minivan hydroplanes today, it said to me as I was getting ready for work one morning after Elizabeth had left with the kids for school. Rain was pounding on the windows outside as I stared directly into my bedroom mirror and fastened my necktie. Daniel, did you hear? Much higher than normal chance. Roads are slick today. And you know how Elizabeth gets when the kids fight, can't focus. Probably will happen this time, to be frank with you. Daniel. I tried to ignore it, slipping the tie through the knot for the 3rd time, only for the damn thing to come unraveled again. I looked down, my hand shaking, and managed to get the knot tied. I looked back up at the mirror and leapt back. The reflection showed it was in the closet again. The face, grinning. I turned around and sure enough, it was there. It gave me a sly wink. Daniel, that's not even considering what will happen at work today. Didn't you hear? Evans is launching surprise competency tests. Wants to make sure everyone's checking their emails, being a team player. How long has it been since you read one of those little things cluttering up your inbox? Doesn't matter, too late now. Most likely you'll be let go. Chances are very high for that today. Daniel, please leave me alone, I said. Daniel? What? I said. Have you heard? It's not good news, I'm afraid. Cancer. Ugh. I can smell it from here. Your liver, it has to be. Advanced stage 2. Maybe it's for the best. The children are young. Elizabeth too. Not even 40. Plenty of time for them all to move on. Daniel, why are you here? I asked. Maybe for the 50th time that week. Mrs. Ryan, my name is Lieutenant Jack Moser. I served with your husband Steve. I'm here to... No, please. Steve was a fine soldier. No, God. Please, God, no, please. Please. It viciously mimicked the sound of a military wife breaking down for the rest of the time it took for me to leave the house. I never learned if it made up these little tidbits, or if it was channeling something that had actually happened. I never bothered to look up any of the names or stories it gave me, just in case they were true. I left the house without looking back, though I could feel it glaring at me from the upstairs bedroom window. I don't know how I survived those first few months of hell. I prayed a lot. It helped, I think. But if I ever dared to pray aloud, it would get so angry. It would threaten Elizabeth and the kids. So I kept my mouth shut. At this point in the movies, the protagonist would be figuring out a way to banish the spirit or otherwise succumb to possession or madness. I wasn't so lucky as that. It pushed me to the brink of sanity, I think, but never allowed me to slip over the edge. There wasn't much fun in bullying an insane man, I suppose, because he doesn't really care all that much anymore. Instead, just as the gulf of madness seemed ready to envelop me, the bedroom ghost would reel me back in. It would disappear, go quiet, life would improve. Then, just as he was fading to the back of my mind, he would start again. Naturally, some of his predictions started coming true. Delphi really did break her ankle at a gymnastics meet, though it was when another girl fell on her rather than a faulty balancing beam. And Elizabeth asked that I start taking the kids on the weekends because, in the spirit of honesty and love, she had been tempted by another child's father. Luckily, they didn't wreck the minivan, nor did I have liver cancer, which I learned only after requesting an extensive and pricey screening. It's been 4 years since the bedroom ghost first appeared in my closet. He's on sabbatical for the time being. It's his longest yet. Maybe he's gone for good. Maybe he'll be back. I try not to get my hopes up. Maybe I should take up church in the meantime. I don't know. I'm so damn tired. I feel like my mind has been stretched again and again like an elastic band, and it loses some of its tautness with each pull. I've lost weight, hair, and sleep. My family is still as unaffected as ever. At least, counting my blessings on that front at least. I place my pen down and stare at the pages of the journal chronicling my experience with the bedroom ghost. I don't know why I felt the urge to write it all down, but I'm glad I did. Maybe it will be useful to someone someday. I hear the patter of footsteps outside in the hall. The door swung open, a gust of cold air hitting the back of my chair. My heart stopped. Dad? My shoulders slumped with relief. Hey sport, everything okay? I spun the desk chair and offered Duncan a weak but earnest smile. Yeah, what do you need? Sorry? Need. Yeah. Will it take long? Duncan, what are you talking about? Seaman, Dad, I heard you call my name all the way from downstairs. Cassandra's mirror. Sabrina and I had been working together for some years before we decided to get married. She is a historian, and I am a chemist. To be more precise, Sabrina specializes in the witch hunt, which ravaged Europe from around 1450 until 1750. In theory, what we do is simple. Sabrina tracks down any journals she can find, owned by these so-called witches. Their grimoires, if you will. Together we recreate and research the recipes we find inside for their medical qualities, selling the data to pharmaceutical companies. Due to the current demand for completely natural beauty products, we make a pretty good living, although we are still waiting for our big payday. We have always joked that we make our living off witchcraft, so much so that when I asked her to marry me, apart from the engagement ring, I also gave her a necklace with a little silver broomstick attached to it. Sabrina always insisted the necklace was a better representation of our love than the engagement ring ever could be. It sort of makes me regret I spent so much money on that ring. About a year ago, Sabrina became obsessed with a name which kept recurring in various grimoires. Many of these manuscripts referenced a woman by the name of Cassandra. Apparently, Cassandra had been one of the most talented healers of her time. Her grimoire contained knowledge of plants and herbs far exceeding that of any other. Sabrina became fixated on finding Cassandra's grimoire. She was sure that Cassandra would be our big payday. Sabrina spent months going through her research. She combed through countless inquisitorial documents of the Catholic Church, hoping to find a trace of Cassandra in their witch trials. I had never seen her so focused. Sabrina became obsessed. Soon her obsession turned our relationship sour. Sabrina would wake up and lock herself into her office, only to come out to eat and sleep. For weeks we barely spoke. Then last month, just as I was seriously considering organizing an intervention, Sabrina found her. A 15th century German inquisitor by the name of Heinrich Kramer had been the one to condemn Cassandra. Kramer had written about Cassandra in his journal. However, the last page of Kramer's journal was missing. It seemed to have been ripped out long ago. What we could decipher of Cassandra's story seemed fragmented and fantastical at best. Kramer wrote Cassandra had committed a most disgusting sin, a crime so vile it went against the very laws of nature. She had bargained with the devil, sacrificing hundreds of lives in return for one. However, Kramer's writing is vague, and due to the absence of the last page, the story is incomplete. We did not know what Cassandra's crime had been. Kramer's journal offers no further detail about Cassandra's trial, apart from stating that they would lock away Cassandra in a prison for all eternity, so even the devil would not find her. Sabrina had been livid after reading Kramer's journal. She thought that Cassandra had just been another victim of our patriarchal society, just another woman whose only crime was that her knowledge exceeded that of man's. That weekend I took Sabrina out for dinner, in an attempt to lift the mood. She spent the evening silently staring at her food. When we got back into the car, I locked the doors and turned to her. This can't go on any longer. Your obsession with Cassandra is unhealthy. It has to stop. Sabrina stared at me. She looked like she was about to argue, but then sighed. I can't, she said apologetically. After all these months, I can't give up now that I found her. She exists, which means her grimoire exists as well. God knows how long it will take you to find her grimoire. It almost took you a year to find any reference of Cassandra's name. I already found it. What? I made some calls to my German colleagues, Sabrina continued before I could interject. Apparently Heinrich Kramer was quite the hoarder. All of his writings and all the manuscripts he collected have been archived. I asked my friends to do some digging and they found Cassandra grimoire. I have to go to Germany to pick it up. I thought about it for a couple of moments. The way I saw it, once Sabrina had Cassandra's grimoire, we could finally go back to how things were before her obsession. Okay, I said, go to Germany and bring back Cassandra's journal. But when this is done, we are taking a vacation. Sabrina grinned and threw her arms around me. I promise. After her return, things became more peculiar. Sabrina just seemed off. She barely spoke to me, locking herself away in her study, poring over Cassandra's grimoire. Sometimes when I stood at her door and listened, I could hear her mutter to herself. Occasionally, I could swear I heard another voice whispering back at her. The thought sent a cold shiver down my spine. After returning from Germany, Sabrina also became obsessed with having children. Sabrina insisted that the time was right for a child, so we began trying every night. We had talked early in our relationship about having children, and Sabrina had admitted she would rather focus on her career. Although I had always wanted children, I had had no problem waiting until Sabrina felt ready. However, her sudden need for a child felt inexplicable to me. Over the last 3 weeks, my uneasiness only increased. Sabrina's behavior has subtly been changing to such an extent, I almost began to suspect that the Sabrina I am currently living with is not the one I married. I wanted to investigate what she has been working on, so the other day I went into her study. Cassandra's grimoire lay open in the middle of her desk. It seemed to invite me to come closer. As I placed my hand on the grimoire's dark leather binding, I thought I heard the faintest whisper coming from the book. Before I had time to react, Sabrina caught me and kicked me out. I had never seen her so furious. Her eyes seemed to burn with hate as she closed the door behind me. That's when I came up with a plan. I needed to get back into her study and investigate Cassandra's grimoire. A force I did not understand seemed to pull me towards the grimoire. Every Wednesday, Sabrina goes out of the house early in the morning, only to return in the afternoon. On Monday, I told Sabrina I would be gone for a couple days visiting old friends. After I left the house, I checked into a hotel nearby. I waited until Wednesday morning to park my car across the street and wait for Sabrina to leave. After she left, I went into her study. Her desk was littered with stacks of paper. Cassandra's grimoire sat on the middle of the table. Once again, I felt a strange pull towards the book. I opened the grimoire and began looking through its contents. The moment my fingers touched the grimoire, I could have sworn something whispered out to me. However, every time I tried to understand the whispers, they disappeared. I stared at the grimoire's leather binding. It was more artistic than the others, and beautifully crafted. Although the book was hundreds of years old, the leather had not withered with age. Its black cover shone brightly, almost as if inviting me to open it. I could make out faint lines cut along the cover. After absent-mindedly tracing them with my finger, I realized the lines formed a pentagram. Suddenly, the whispers began again, louder than before. I flipped open the book and placed my hand on the inside of the cover. Something felt odd. The leather bounced at my touch. After a brief inspection, I realized there was a small incision hidden in the binding. Carefully, I pulled it open and stuck my finger inside, retrieving 2 sheets of yellowed paper. I recognized the missing page of Kramer's journal immediately. Its contents made me feel nauseated. Kramer wrote that Cassandra had used her magic to kill hundreds of people in her village and sacrificed their souls to the devil. In return, Satan granted Cassandra's eternal wish. Her firstborn would be the Antichrist and ring in the end of time. Kramer tried to burn Cassandra at the stake, but it did not work. She defied death and laughed as the flames licked her body. By his own admission, Kramer had been terrified. He could not kill Cassandra through earthly means, so to his own shame, he resorted to witchcraft himself. Kramer writes that they locked Cassandra away in a realm beyond ours where she would hopefully rot for all eternity. A pit in my stomach had formed, and I could feel myself sweat profusely. Having finished Kramer's journal, I turned my attention to the other piece of paper which had been hidden in the grimoire. The markings on the sheet seemed foreign to me. I only recognized one word which had been scribbled on the top of the paper. Sabrina had written key on top of the paper. The moment my fingers touched the sheet, the whispers began again, clearer than ever before. The page whispered at me in a language I did not understand. However, I felt compelled to repeat the words. Then, as soon as I repeated the words, the whispers disappeared. For a moment, I looked around the room in anticipation, but nothing happened. The silence hung heavy around me. After a moment, the absurdity of it all hit me. I felt angry. Did I honestly believe in witchcraft? Was all of this real? I was a scientist after all, a field established through reason. None of this made any sense to me anymore. Maybe it was all in my mind after all. a cry for help from my subconscious. I got up and walked to the mirror at the far side of the room, staring at my own reflection, embittered by my own gullibility. "This isn't real," I muttered as I crumbled up the piece of paper in my hand and threw it at my reflection. The crumbled sheet slipped through the mirror's smooth surface. Like a stone falling in water, the paper sent ripples across the surface as it disappeared. I stood before the mirror, petrified, unable to understand what happened. I felt my heart going in overdrive. My mind felt heavy, yet I felt compelled to go through the mirror. I held my breath and stepped inside. I had entered a small room. It was cold and dark. After my eyes got accustomed to the darkness, I began to make out different shapes. Apart from the mirror I had just entered through the room was filled sparsely. A small wooden table and chair stood next to me. On the far side of the room stood a tiny bed. On it I recognized the contours of a body hidden under the covers. "Hello," I said, my voice a faint whisper. "Hello?" I forced myself to repeat before slowly shuffling towards the bed. Once I reached the bed, I summoned all my courage and pulled away the covers. The bed's contents made me shriek and fall backwards onto the hard stone floor. The shriveled body of a woman lay before me. I was horrified by the state of its decomposition. It seemed to me like someone had sucked the very life force out of her. Although the body was impossible to identify, the clothes it wore seemed familiar. I had seen them before. Tears began to roll down my cheeks. My body had already accepted what my mind was still unable to. That's when my eyes lingered on the body's neck. Something shiny had caught my attention. I bent over the body and saw a small silver broomstick hanging on a necklace. I began to sob. A sudden wave of despair crashed over me as my knees buckled. I don't know how long I cried there, but it felt like an eternity. The tiny room had drained all happiness away from me. I had to leave. I could not stand to be there anymore. I ran back through the mirror and found myself in my wife's study once more. I looked back at the mirror. I had left my wife behind. An uncontrollable sadness spread through my body, quickly followed by rage. All of a sudden, I heard a car door closing outside. Sabrina had returned. She could not find me here. I hurried out of her office and ran down the stairs just in time to see her walk through the front door. She jumped as she saw me. "I thought you would be gone until this evening." The meetings didn't take as long as I anticipated. Sabrina gave me a searching look. "Are you okay? Your eyes look puffy." I shrugged. "Allergies." Sabrina beamed at me. "Well, I'm happy you are here. I have some amazing news." "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." I saw her lips move, but I could not register her words. Sabrina came towards me. "Impregnant." A smile spread across her face as she stared at me. Her eyes almost bulged out their sockets. She grabbed my hand. Her touch felt like ice. "Impregnant." Job interview in the basement of an abandoned mall? Don't go. I've been unemployed for a while. The kind of a while that makes you start applying for jobs you're not qualified for, jobs you don't want, jobs that seem made up. Anything that pays, anything that gets you out of your head. That's how I ended up here. It was around 2:30 a.m. and I couldn't sleep again, so I started mindlessly scrolling through job boards and local gigs. Most of them were the usual crap. MLM scams, unpaid internships, weird delivery jobs that required a passport for some reason. Then I saw it. Seeking one candidate for a position that will change everything. No experience necessary. Must be willing to commit to something larger than yourself. No company name. No contact info. Just a link to a form. I don't even remember filling it out. Honestly, I thought it was a prank, but the next morning there was an email in my inbox. "Congratulations. You've been selected for an interview. Report to the sub-basement of Ridgewood Galleria. Thursday 5 p.m. sharp. Wear business attire. Do not bring anyone with you. This is your final opportunity." Ridgewood Galleria is practically a ghost town. It was big in the 90s, but most of it's been abandoned for years. There's still a nail salon, a vape store, and one of those sad discount clothing places that sells irregular socks and off-brand cologne. That's it. The sub-basement part threw me. I didn't even know there was a basement, let alone a sub. But like I said, I was desperate. I borrowed a wrinkled button-up shirt from my roommate, printed a resume I knew they wouldn't read, and showed up a few minutes early. The mall was almost empty. Just that weird hum of artificial light and old pop music echoing through dead stores. I followed the instructions from the email. Down the main hall, past the food court, through the employees-only door behind the old wet seal. The hallway smelled like mildew and forgotten things. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering every few seconds like they were fighting to stay alive. I kept going. Down a concrete stairwell, past one landing, then another, then a third. There were signs taped to the walls, printed on old yellowed paper. They said things like, "The Foundation is listening. Don't look behind you between levels. All who descend must bleed." That's when I should turned around. That's when any sane person would turn around. But I didn't. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a single wooden door. No knob, just a faded brass plate that read "Candidates Only." The second I stepped toward it, it opened on its own. The room inside was circular, lit by red overhead bulbs that cast everything in a sick, pulsing glow. The air was heavy, humid, like being inside a lung. The walls were raw concrete, wet in places. In the center of the room stood a large black stone slab, rough and veined with something that looked almost alive, like capillaries, or vines, or both. 3 people sat at a long table against the far wall. They wore matching charcoal gray suits. Their skin looked off, too smooth, too tight across their cheekbones, like mannequins dusted with foundation. Their hair didn't move. Their eyes didn't blink. No introductions, no smiles. One of them, the one in the middle, stood and said they had reviewed my materials. I was confused as hell because I hadn't submitted anything except my name and email. Then the one on the left just up and told me I was hired, and the person sitting on the right told me to step forward and place my hand on the altar. I laughed, nervous, and asked if they were serious. Didn't they want to ask me anything? But the person in the middle cut me off and said there wouldn't be any questions, only the mark. I didn't move. The room darkened around me, not gradually, more like someone had reached into the air and turned down the volume of light itself. The red bulbs dimmed, and the concrete seemed to stretch inward. The air got thicker. I felt pressure in my ears, like I was changing altitude. That word "marked" slammed into me like a cold wave. I stepped forward. Embedded in the slab was a knife, not modern, curved, bronze or copper, stained with something too dark to be rust. I wrapped my fingers around the handle. It felt warm. I pricked my palm. Just a quick slice. A few drops of blood fell onto the stone. They didn't drip. They sank in. The slab pulsed. The walls seemed to breathe. The red lights flared, then dimmed again. I heard a sound, low and humming, not in the air but in my chest, like a tuning fork inside my bones. And then, a word, not spoken, not heard, but felt, accepted. The lights flickered again. I blinked, and the slab was clean, dry, like I'd never touched it. The 3 figures stood together. The middle one approached and handed me a red folder. They spoke in unison. It was something like, "Your job begins at dawn. Do not speak of this. Do not deviate from the path. Do not attempt to quit." They said it like a prayer, or a warning. Maybe it was both. A door I hadn't noticed before, gray metal with a glowing green exit sign above it, creaked open behind me. The hallway beyond was dark, but familiar. I walked through it like a sleepwalker. I don't remember how I got home. I woke up the next morning in my bed, fully dressed. The red folder was on my nightstand. At first, I thought maybe I'd dreamed the whole thing. The interview, the slab, the blood, all of it. My palm ached, but when I looked, no cut, no scar, just clean, unbroken skin. But the folder was still there, inside. A plastic ID badge with no name or company, just a barcode and a blurry photo of me I don't remember taking. A printed schedule. My first shift was that night, listed as Task Observe. Location, Ridgewood Galleria, Food Court. Time, 1:11 a.m., 4:04 a.m. Then a list of rules, 15 of them. Here are the ones that I can remember off the top of my head. Enter through the service door behind wet seal. Do not speak to anyone who speaks first. If you see your reflection walking independently of your actions, do not engage. If you hear footsteps behind you, keep walking. Never eat mall food. When working the 3 a.m. shift, no matter what happens, remain completely still between 3:33 and 3:44 a.m. You cannot quit. You can only be replaced. I almost didn't go, but when I tried to throw the badge away, my kitchen light shorted out and all the faucets in the apartment turned on at once, water gushing. No explanation. My phone screen flickered and displayed only one word. Boned. So yeah, I went. The mall was worse at night. The silence was suffocating. The air smelled like rot and plastic, and something older like damp stone and rusty iron. I slipped in through the service entrance and found my way to the food court. Everything was exactly as I remembered, except the mannequins. There were mannequins scattered across the tables, not mall mannequins. No makeup, no smiles. These were blank, genderless, wrapped in yellowing plastic, with red string crisscrossed around their torsos and faces. Each one had a number written in marker across the chest. They were arranged like they were eating. Some sat upright, some slumped over trays of decayed, long-rotted food. One had a straw jammed through its plastic lips and into a spilled milkshake that smelled like vinegar. At exactly 1:11 a.m., the lights dimmed, and the mannequins moved. Not all at once, just little things. A head tilt here, a hand twitch there. One slowly turned to face me. Another lifted a finger and pointed directly at my chest. My heart was hammering. My hands were sweating. I looked at the badge. The barcode glowed faintly green. I kept standing, kept watching, just like the folder said. After what felt like days, the clock on my phone finally ticked to 2:04 a.m. The lights blinked back to full brightness, and the mannequins were back in their original positions. I left without looking back. That was my first shift. I've had 6 more since then. Each one is stranger, harder to explain, harder to remember. One night I had to sit in the Eau Claire's and listen to the sound of something breathing behind the pierced ear display. Another night I had to follow a woman in a janitor uniform around the mall in silence. When she stopped and turned, she had my face, but older, tired, and missing a tooth or two. Last night, my task was to stand still from 3:33 to 3:44 a.m. in the central atrium. I did. I didn't move an inch, not even when the floor beneath me opened like a mouth and whispered in a language I shouldn't understand but somehow did. I don't sleep much now. When I do, I dream of escalators that lead nowhere, elevators full of mirrors, and parking lots that stretch into the sky. My calendar no longer matches real days. I looked at my phone this morning and it said day 7 of the mall. I think I'm changing. I think I've already changed. There's something beneath Ridgewood Galleria. I know it. I can feel it. It's almost like it's all I can feel. It's not a company, not a cult, but a presence, a hunger. And we're the employees it feeds through. I tried to quit last night. I walked into the one store still open, an old Foot Locker, sat down at the counter and told the man behind it that I wasn't doing this anymore. He didn't look up. He just said, "Quitting is a privilege for the living." Tonight's shift says, task crossover, time 2:22 a.m. I don't think I'm coming back. If you see a posting like the one I answered, don't click it. If you already clicked it, don't go. And if you've already gone, God help you, because the mall already knows your name. Everyone but me is dead, and I'm no longer in Antarctica. My name is Jason Rich. I can't say much about who I work for other than that I'm US-related personnel assigned to a remote research station in the vicinity of the South Pole. I'm leaving this memo in case whoever finds me too. In Antarctica, nothing drifts off course by accident. Not the wind, not the snow, and certainly not the dead. We operated Vireo Station under strict compartmentalization protocols. No satellite uplinks. No GPS beacons. Not even a formal designation in the Antarctic Treaty Registry. It was a black site research outpost, established well outside the operational boundaries of known facilities, far southeast of Vostok Station. The fewer people who knew we existed, the better. That included the ones delivering our lifeline. Our monthly resupply was orchestrated with clinical precision to maintain plausible deniability. The Globemaster pilots flying out of Christchurch were given one simple instruction: drop at coordinates XX°S, XX°E, a dead zone. A patch of polar plateau that, on paper, meant nothing. The crews didn't know who or what they were supplying, just that they were to fly a designated corridor under MCON emissions control and drop a sealed pallet from altitude at a timestamp synchronized with satellite overpass windows. The idea was simple: even if someone intercepted the flight data, saw them on radar, or dropped via eyesight, they wouldn't be able to trace it back to us. My role here was equally stripped down. I knew nothing of what my other colleagues' business was. Just the basics. We were there to do science things. I was the field systems tech, electrician, diesel mechanic, infrastructure maintenance, comm specialist, everything short of medical. Titles like systems specialist sounded tidy on paper, but in the field it meant I was the one crawling through snowdrifts with a multimeter in my teeth and a wrench in my glove. When the monthly drop window opened, I was to drive exactly 25 statute miles due true north, 0 degrees by Fluxgate compass, from the station's hidden position. GPS devices were explicitly restricted. We had several GD300s cell locked in the comms rack in a Faraday cage, encrypted and off-network, but they stayed off unless under direct instruction or in case of an extreme life-threatening emergency. No tracking, no transmissions, no exceptions. The BV-206, a dual-cab articulated tracked carrier designed for deep snow traversal, was our workhorse. The Norwegian Hägglunds had been retrofitted with a reinforced fuel bladder, insulated cab seals, and a military-grade Arctic preheater. It handled well over uneven snowpack in Sastrugi, and its low ground pressure let it float over most drifts. Navigation was done the old-fashioned way: map grid, magnetic bearing, Fluxgate repeater, and a wristwatch. I left mid-morning. Weather forecasts were clean. A minor low-pressure system over Dome C, nothing unusual. Visibility was sharp. Atmospheric clarity near 100 kilometers. I confirmed my bearing at 000 degree T and engaged low gear. The BV rumbled across the ice shelf at a modest 25 kilometers per h, stabilized by the vehicle's independent torsion bar suspension. It was a straight vector. No deviations, no landmarks. Just the axial drift of the wind and the distant hiss of turbines on the wind farm fading behind me. The trip was expected to take 2 hours round trip. Retrieve the crate, return, eat reconstituted stew, no variables. I'd made it, the bright orange chute desperately trying to escape the load in the heavy wind. After unsecuring all 6 crates from the roll-off pallet, I hauled them into the rear cabin of the BV, my fingers aching at their weight through my thick mittens. On return at kilometer 46, the barometric pressure began to drop faster than forecast. A warm core polar cyclone was forming from the east, surging along a jet stream wobble out of Queen Maud Land. The visibility collapsed from 30 kilometers to 300 meters in under 40 minutes. Whiteout. Whiteout isn't poetic. It's literal: no ground, no sky, just a luminous, depthless void. My visibility was reduced to the arc of the BV's forward halogens, twin cones stabbing into milk. The compass showed 180 degree T, my return vector. I stayed glued to it like a lifeline. I was blind, and at the mercy of chance I'd stayed directly on course. No margin for drift. Luckily there wasn't much to crash into out here, just a couple spots we'd plotted previously on the map to avoid crevasses as well as possible hidden birdschruns and rancloughs. The BV groaned against crosswinds and I kept one hand on the Fluxgate repeater, correcting heading in 10-degree bursts as the wind shear pushed me west. All I could do was trust the odometer, correct for any skid slippage, and pray to every mechanical god that the calibration held. By the time I reached the station perimeter, the entire site was ghosted in stormlight. The heliostat mounts were buried to their elbows in snow, and the steel frame comms towers swayed ominously. I rounded the thermal outbuilding and coasted to a halt in front of the station airlock. Something was wrong. The main door was sealed. Now, in Condition 2, the protocol was full lockdown. I knew that, but I also knew my team, Mark, Keller, and Anja, would have had a live band on the UHF. SOP was to monitor the return frequency from the moment I left until I was physically back inside. There was no excuse for silence. I keyed the mic. TARS 5. This is Rich. On final approach. Open up. Nothing. I cycled the frequency, tried the backup, even triggered the old tone squelch band we used during maintenance cycles. Still nothing. The VHF carrier light blinked green. Active. But the signal was empty. Comms rack might be iced over, I muttered to myself. Or Keller tried to toast something again. It wasn't a joke. It once blown a circuit rerouting power from the UHF amp to the galley kettle. I let the BV idle. The heaters held steady at 38 degrees Celsius. Cabin temps were survivable. I leaned back, gloves off, thermos in hand. Just a few minutes, I thought. Let the wind pass. Then I'd try again. I blinked. When I opened my eyes, it was morning. The BV was silent. The heaters were dead. The cabin air was brittle. Ice had crept across the inside of the windshield, curling like veins. My boots were numb. My fingers, darkening at the knuckles, twitched back into their mittens as I registered what had happened. I'd fallen asleep. The BV had run dry. I was sitting in a block of freezing steel with no comms and a storm still pounding outside. The latch resisted at first. Ice had frozen it shut. I braced and kicked. The door cracked open with a report like a gunshot. Snow blasted in. That's when I saw the tracks. A single set of boot prints leading to the BV, stopping at the driver's side, already softening under fresh powder. Someone had come. Someone had looked inside and left me. I dropped from the pilot seat into the waist-deep waves drifting up the side of the cold, dead vehicle. The cold burned through my thermals like dry ice. I staggered through the gale, following the marker flags toward the vestibule. The main door was ajar. No light spilled out, just wind and frost, and the faint whine of air moving through a dead vent. I stepped inside and found the station silent. Then I smelled blood. The metallic tang hit me just as I rounded the inner vestibule door. It was faint, but unmistakable. I froze. Even beneath the cold, the air carried it. Acrid, stale, clinging to every surface like a residue of violence. My headlamp cut through the gloom, illuminating scattered papers, a fallen chair, and the mess table. Keller was the first one I saw. I ran to him, nearly slipping on broken glass and frosted laminate. The gruesome scene hit me like a truck, eternally seared into my conscience. He was slumped forward across the table, body stiff, face submerged in a broken bowl of now frozen chicken noodle soup. Blood had seeped from a dark hole at his right temple and formed an icicle that stretched from his skull, culminating into a frozen crimson puddle on the floor below. A second exit wound populated the back of his right shoulder. His lifeless eyes stared back at me, begging me. I stumbled back. My breath hitched. The station, our remote sanctuary, had become a tomb. I made my way to the lab, each step a battle against disbelief. My boots echoed down the corridor, crunching over shattered glass. The lab door was ajar. Inside, chaos reigned. Equipment was overturned. Sample vials shattered across the floor. Papers were everywhere, cabinets and compartments raided, as if someone had ransacked the place with purpose. And amid it all, I found the others. Anja was lying on the ground near the centrifuge. Blood pooled beneath her side. Her expression was blank, her eyes wide open, frozen in the moment of her death. The exit wound had bled heavily before the sub-zero temperatures stopped everything cold. She had been shot at close range in the back of the head. Blood painted the space before her. Mark was crumpled at the workstation, collapsed over his laptop in his chair. A bullet had torn through his neck, punched through the monitor, and embedded in the wall behind it. His fingers still rested on the keyboard, forever paused mid-keystroke. I couldn't breathe. My team, my colleagues, my friends were dead. They had been executed, coldly, efficiently, and judging from the disrupted state of the lab, someone had been looking for something. I backed out of the room slowly. I needed air. I needed to try to restore the power before the generator froze over completely, and I was dead too. Who knows how long the power was out. Outside, I fought through the wind and reached the generator housing. The genset had been shut down manually. Breakers flipped. Fuel valves closed. Whoever did this didn't just kill, they wanted the station to die. I reprimed the system, flipped the breakers, and cycled the ignition. The generator coughed and sputtered after a few attempts, then roared to life. Power returned in sections. Emergency lighting flickered on. The heaters whined as they started their cycle. The ambient temperature began to climb, but the chill inside me wouldn't leave. I locked the doors behind me. Inside, I went straight to comms. Every attempt to raise help returned static. The emergency satellite relay was offline, sabotaged. The terminal showed clear signs of tampering, connectors yanked, wires clipped, the dish feed horn bent out of alignment. The shortwave CB still had power. I tried transmitting on emergency bands. I received nothing. Then I noticed the missing gear. The GD300 cells were gone, all of them. I returned to the lab and took inventory. Files were missing, cabinets emptied, sample containers, especially those labeled from Site Delta, were broken or gone entirely. Whoever came wasn't just cleaning house. They were targeting something, information, data, evidence. The storm lingered for days, oscillating between shrieking gales and deceptive calms that lulled me into hoping it might finally pass. I kept the station sealed and subsisted on the cache of rations from the most recent supply drop, shelf-stable MREs, powdered soups, vacuum-sealed snacks, the usual lineup tailored for long-haul missions in isolated conditions. Virio's pantries had been stocked for a crew of 4, hauled the near 35 kilograms crates from the supply drop back inside through 3 feet of snow myself. I calculated that I had enough caloric resources to last me nearly 6 months if I rationed properly. The station felt larger now, not in any physical sense. The modular structure was still a prefab steel skeleton atop stilts, anchored into the permafrost, but in spirit. With my crewmates gone, every corridor echoed. Every door I opened whispered grief. The bodies had begun to thaw. Though I'd restored the station's primary heat loop and localized HVAC systems, I'd sealed off unused compartments to conserve power. The makeshift morgue, formerly the mechanical storage annex, wasn't insulated enough to keep the ambient temperature low enough. The smell had begun to creep into adjacent compartments, a grim reminder of entropy reclaiming order. I took an afternoon, grim and cold, to wrap each of them in thermal mylar and stuff them into surplus sleeping bags. One by one, I carried their remains out into the white. There was a flat patch behind the generator shack where snow accumulated less readily. I used a folding and trenching tool and dug 3 shallow trenches into the permafrost, just enough to lay them side by side. I left markers, simple laminated ID tags on stakes. With the crew buried and the wind howling outside, I kept to my routine. Morning diagnostics on the generator, voltage checks on the UPS battery rack, thermal readings from the HAB modules. I ran each system through its test cycles manually. The old ways kept me sane. Then on the 8th day, the generator failed. It didn't sputter, it didn't warn me with flickering lights or a coolant alarm. It just stopped. I heard the change before I saw it. The station had a particular hum when fully operational, a subtle vibration that carried through the floor plates. When it died, it felt like someone had sucked all the energy from the air. I was halfway through thawing a meal packet when the lights dimmed and the blower fans went silent. I sprinted to the power module. The 30 kilowatts genset was dark. I checked fuel, half a tank. Oil level, good. Battery, fully charged. The control panel threw a general fault but gave no error code. I began a manual inspection. Fuel filter, clean. Fuel line, no obstruction. Fuel pump, silent. I bled the line, reprimed, tried to restart. Nothing. The solenoid engaged, but the starter didn't crank. I bypassed the ignition relay with a jumper wire, a risky move in any condition, but necessary. Still nothing. I opened the access panels and felt along the injector rail, cold, dead. It was as if the entire engine block had seized despite regular preheater cycles and no prior signs of mechanical stress. With limited tools and no spare components beyond filters, belts, and fluid, I was out of options. The genset was down hard. The solar array, a modest bank of PV panels mounted to the north side of the station, could only supply about 300 watts during peak twilight, just enough to trickle charge essential systems and provide minimal lighting. The battery inverter rack still held a decent charge, and I could stretch it by shutting down all non-essential loads. I turned my attention back to the comms rack. The satellite uplink was a loss. Connectors severed, circuit boards fried with an unknown sticky liquid, the feed horn visibly warped. The coaxial runs had been removed cleanly from their couplings. Not yanked, cut. Whoever did this had a precise understanding of the system architecture. I stripped back the primary line, rerouted bypass power from the UPS, and jumped the feed into the auxiliary port. Nothing. No initialization, no signal lock. The modem was dead. The backup control board had burned scoring across its terminals and hairline fractures in the SMD components. All I had left was the shortwave CB in the handheld. I keyed up and tried transmitting across every emergency band I could remember. EHF, legacy Antarctic field ops frequencies, even maritime and aviation CR channels. Carrier present. Dead air. No one was listening. And then I made the call. I'd prepped the Heglans. Vostok Station was approximately 402 statute miles southwest, across a hellscape of sastrugi and open plateau. It was the only manned facility within range, Russian-operated and well-equipped with high-power comms arrays. I could only pray they didn't mind a stray American. I ran through the loadout checklist by hand. Fuel topped off, 4 reserve jerry cans loaded and secured in the aft module. MRE's snacks and sealed water bricks packed. Jet boil and propane. 2 sleeping systems, double layered with thermal liners. Ice axe, a shovel, pick, and other tools. 3 days of batteries in a vacuum-lined thermal case for my headlamp and flashlight. Trust me, you'd regret it if they got wet or too cold. Emergency HF whip and trailing wire antenna mounted to the roof rail. The old machine was idling smoothly now, engine block purring under a preheater cycle. I checked the fluxgate compass, zeroed the heading to 189.61 degrees true, my intended track to Vostok from our current position, and did one more exterior check of the rig before my departure. I climbed into the operator's seat, sealed the door, and eased the rig forward. The treads bit into the hardened drift, and I left Vireo Station behind, into the cold alone, and headed straight into the unknown. Roughly 2 hours into the drive, the rig's front left track threw tension. I didn't need a warning light. I felt the shift immediately through the chassis, a sluggish veer to the left, followed by an audible slap and grind that cut through the low drone of the engine. I killed the throttle and eased us to a stop. I dismounted into the crunch of firm wind-packed snow, the cold cutting instantly through the seams in my jacket. Light levels were low, constant dim twilight casting the world in a silver-gray hue, the ambient band of light along the horizon barely perceptible from the rest of the icebound sky. Polar twilight, perpetual dusk, no sun, no stars, just endless horizon and shadow. I crouched down beside the track assembly, a thrown idler or snapped guide link, maybe. The entire lead segment of the portside track was loose, having detracked around the front bogie, dragged along at tension by the rear module. Not catastrophic, but enough to halt any serious forward movement. I swore quietly into the muffled wind. I could idle, I could even keep warm, but forward travel was shot unless I wanted to break out the tools and spend hours under a half-ton steel undercarriage in minus 40 degrees Celsius wind chill with no help if something slipped and took a finger. And that's when I saw it. A glow. Soft. Blue. Static. Roughly 2 miles out by my estimation. Low on the horizon, barely visible through a light veil of blowing surface snow. At first I thought it might be the aurora on the horizon, but it was localized. Too steady. It was a ground source. Help? Maybe? I climbed back into the BV, fetched the binoculars, and propped my elbows on the dash. No radio towers. No structures. Just a single low, steady point of bluish-white light. I checked the map again, fanned out on the rear seat. According to every known coordinate plotted on the Vostok route vector, there shouldn't be anything out here. No weather station. No field camp. No markers or terrain features at all. Just bare glacial plateau. I switched on the onboard CB. Any station this net. Any station this net. This is TARS 5 on mobile. How Yumi. Over. TARS 5 was the designated call sign we used for any long-range or unsecure radio transmissions if required for emergency use. Officially, unofficially, it stood for Temporary Atmospheric Research Shelter, a generic label used to mask the station's true purpose under a plausible civilian research designation. Static. Nothing but the hollow wash of carrier noise. I hesitated, then packed a day pack, slung on my outer shell, and stepped back into the wind. Conditions weren't terrible. Winds steady at 5 mph 10 knots from the east, with visible low stratiform buildup on the horizon. Maybe 5 miles out, maybe less. I gave myself an hour to walk out, recon the light, and return. I left the BV running, battery warmed, alternator cycling, cabin temp at 30 degrees Celsius. I topped off the tank manually, cracked the valve on the reserve jerrycan to compensate, and then marked my departure point manually with bright fluorescent survey tape on a tall wooden stake, and began the walk. It was probably overkill with the obvious bright lights on the rig and all, but if a whiteout swallowed the BV while I was still within walking distance, I wasn't gonna guess my way back through 30-knot winds if it lost power again. I moved fast. The snow was light and dry, the sort of grainy surface accumulation that made snowshoes practically worthless. Every step sank to just below the knee. I adjusted my gait accordingly, breathing steadily, maintaining heat output without sweating. The wind bit at the gaps around my goggles. The light ahead remained unchanged. At about the 10-minute mark, I began to notice more of them. Other lights. At first just a second, maybe a third point of illumination, then more. Spaced irregularly along the surface, each casting the same eerie blue halo into the ice and snow. At about 30 minutes, I reached the first about 2.5 miles from the rig. A cube, roughly 1 meter by 1 meter, perfectly proportioned, featureless. Its surface was pure white, not just painted, but impossibly white, albeit near 100%. A thick mist clung to its surfaces, like vapor rolling across dry ice. It sat flush with the ice below, grounded, unmoving. I walked a slow circle around it, reaching out just short of contact, pulling my hand away quickly. No seams, no ports, no panels, nothing. I was scared to touch it, dumbfounded. The glow had no visible source, nor did its thick mist. My watch was dead. I pulled it back inside my glove, tapped it, nothing. Screen black, no frost, no damage, just inert. I glanced north. The BV was still visible, a warm yellow pinprick in the distance. I could still make it back. The storm hadn't reached me yet. I began my walk back, defeated, extremely confused, and quite unsettled. Though I wanted to investigate further, I knew I needed to leave and head back towards the rig if I wanted to beat the storm. I heard it first, a sharp, high-pitched tone, just at the edge of perception. It pierced the air like a sustained whine, mechanical yet organic, almost like white noise, except it wasn't. It was layered, unnatural, vibrating in my teeth. I stopped dead in my tracks, chest tightening. My ears throbbed, and then instinctively whipped back around, and the cube was gone. In its place, a hole. I walked back towards whatever this was, the noise growing louder with each step. Perfectly square, 1 meter by 1 meter, no disturbed snow around it, just a seamless void in the ground, a negative space, like a pixel removed from our reality. No depth, just endless. From it came the noise, high-pitched, electrical, layered with something deeper, a rumble buried in the frequency. I stepped closer. Inside was sky. Not like the sky above me, but bright daylight summer sky. Clouds, blue, depth, sunshine. It was peaceful, like someone had cut a square in the ice and opened a window into an entirely different place. I felt nausea rise in my gut, not vertigo, something else. My balance shifted. The pressure in my ears changed, like descending rapidly in a pressurized aircraft. I stumbled back, away from the edge. The snow had begun to fall, and I turned, ran, the noise fading as I gained ground. The snow whipped harder now, the wind's velocity increasing, the warm glow of the BV slipping in and out of view, obscured by powder and looming darkness. Then came the sound. An explosion. Not concussive, not airburst. Electrostatic, like the sky tearing open via live amperage. The world illuminated behind me. I turned again. The cubes, all of them, were erupting. Shafts of blinding white light firing vertically into the atmosphere, cutting clean through the clouds, illuminating the dense snow like stadium floodlights. Panic took over. I sprinted. The terrain was gone, obliterated by snow and noise and light. My chest burned. My lungs clawed for air. My scarf soaked through and froze in layers. I coughed, choked, vomited into my mask. The rig was gone. Lost, swallowed whole. I fell to my knees, defeated. And there, rising from the snow in front of me, another. Slow, silent, steam rolling off its surface like breath from an unseen mouth. It was identical to the first, unmarred, impossible. Divine geometry. I crawled towards it, hand over hand through the drifts. The cold crept into my joints, my spine, my mind. I stared at the anomaly a foot in front of me, studied it through the curtain of wind and snow. Slowly I slid my right glove off, reaching out, fingers bare now, burning in the negative temperatures. My hand shook as I extended it, inch by inch. The whirlwind I find myself at peace with now envelops me in entropy. I've accepted my fate. My final moments. This is it. This is how I die. Face to face with impossible. The cube illuminating my outstretched arm and naked hand. The surface met my palm, and I vanished. A flash of bright white light. Silence. Peace. Nothing. Darkness. Moments later I woke. The first thing I felt was the heat. Thick, dry, and utterly alien, my body violently shaking from the sudden change in temperature. My face was pressed into coarse sun-baked soil, the scent of wheat and dust thick in my nose. I blinked into a brilliant blue sky framed by golden stalks swaying in the breeze, the wind warm against the back of my neck. Everything was too loud. Insects chirping, distant crows calling, the whisper of thousands of dry heads of grain brushing against each other, and a slight ringing in my ears that slowly faded. I hurled once more. My parka clung to me like a wet tarp. I was still in full gear, every zipper and strap accounted for, my boots sinking slightly into loamy earth. I pushed myself up slowly, the weight of my pack unfamiliar in this heat, my breath ragged, disorientation, disbelief. Shock. I turned in place. There was no snow, no cubes, no station, no ice, no headlands. Just field after endless field of wheat, stretching as far as I could see, broken only by a rusted barbed wire fence and a pale white water tower far in the distance. I staggered backward a few steps, nearly tripping over the only mark left behind, a patch of scorched earth beneath where I had lain, exactly 1 meter by 1 meter, perfectly etched into the soil. My hand still burned. I pulled off my glove, half expecting my skin to be gone, but it was there, red, raw, shaking, the cube still imprinted in my nerves. I checked my radio. Fried. I looked at my wristwatch. Still blank. I was somewhere else now. Somewhere real. Somewhere wrong. My brother Henry. The 90s was the period that made me too young to be an 80s baby. 1988 is close enough, okay? I was forced to grow up outside of the metal hair trend and in the era of the boy band haircuts and grunge flannel. To be honest, it wasn't so bad. Recently, however, something resurfaced after many years that made me revisit my childhood and my memories to put together some missing pieces. My mother recorded everything. In the 90s, the cameras were huge, and I was shocked that she didn't have a permanent dent in her shoulder from carrying that damn thing around, asking us to look at the camera and tell her what we were getting up to. There were hours and hours of tapes in Mom's basement covering my birthday parties, school activities, ball games, and hours of just nothing. Playing with toys and pretending acting, I reminded Henry often. Henry is my little brother. He was with me constantly, and we were best friends. When I was around 9 or 10, however, Henry didn't come home from school with me. I stepped off the bus and he was just gone. Mom and Dad listened to my story and exchanged conversations with the police and put up flyers, but he was never heard from again. I know they tried their best, but sometimes I just felt like they didn't even care he was gone. Now, clearing out my mother's basement while she and Dad packed all their furniture for their move, I found myself hunting for our old VHS player, praying the heat and damp hadn't ruined it. I snuck a couple small boxes with tapes that were interestingly labeled into my car. I knew I could have just asked, but after Henry disappeared, Mom was really protective over her tapes. I would tell her after I got them in there that I was just going to keep them safe until they got moved into their new home. Once I was home, I dug out the old CRT TV that I had in college. These smart TVs don't ever want to cooperate with old tech. I don't know why I was nervous. They were just home movies. It would be a fun little trip down memory lane, and getting to see Henry again after so long would be cool. I missed that kid. I dug around in the tapes and found one I figured was one of the oldest. Owen age 1 niece 3. I slid it in and the click of the VCR docking the tape took me back. The picture was a little wonky, so I adjusted the settings a little until it was as clear as it could be. I was holding myself up against a bench at the park. I recognized near my childhood home, spitting bubbles and smacking the seat. I couldn't help but smile. I was a cute-ass kid. "What you doing, Bubba?" my mom's younger voice said from beside the camera. I smiled at her and laughed. That went on for a few minutes, then the camera cut to me a little older, my hair coated in what looked to be straight red dirt. "Owen, you are filthy," my mother laughed. "What did you do?" I laughed and shook my head. "No, Henry." I furrowed my brow. Henry? Surely he wasn't big enough to dump dirt on my head. Henry was 6 when he disappeared. He shouldn't have been born yet. "Well, Henry, that wasn't nice," Mom said. The camera cut again, and I was in the bath playing with toys and talking. I was about 3, I believe. "You're getting water everywhere, Owen," Mom said in a rushed tone. "Give me a sec to put this camera down and I'll get you out." She walked over to the vanity and placed the camera down. I don't know if she meant to leave it running or not, but it faced the sliding mirror door of the closet in her bathroom. I could see the top of my head and my mom helping me out and drying me off. Then, blocking the camera briefly, was an eye. I blinked rapidly and rewinded the video. What the? I played it back and tried to pause it just in time, finally catching it at just the right time. The eye was peeking into the lens, as if it was looking for something. The eye was bloodshot and dark. I tried to make out features of the person the eye belonged to, but it was all shadow around the single piercing eye. The tape ended and I just sat there, staring at the TV for a moment. What the hell was that? I asked myself. The only ones in the house would have been me, Mom, and Dad, but this was after Henry had dumped dirt on my head. I shook my head and rolled my eyes. Surely it was a coincidence. Maybe I had an imaginary friend named Henry too, and Mom liked the name enough to give it to my brother. Weird, but not totally unrealistic. I was a little surprised the tape was so corrupted. It was in short bursts of memories. I saw there was more tape here, but it seemed to skip around. I pulled out another tape. It was one of those old 8mm video cassettes that needed the adapter, and thankfully Mom was a borderline hoarder, and I was able to find a working one. She had upgraded the camera at some point, and these little tapes were the bane of my existence. They were super delicate and flimsy, but I carefully slid the next tape into the adapter. This was labeled Owen's 4th birthday. Homestead. The film scratched to life, and there was little old me sitting in my grandma's kitchen with a large Scooby-Doo birthday cake, with a flaming 4-candle flickering with every excited move I made. My family was standing around singing, and I blew out my candle to applause. Mom filmed around the kitchen. I noticed something odd near the entrance to the living room. Sitting on the floor holding a red ball was a little boy, maybe 3. He was looking over at us, staring blankly. He kind of looked like Henry, but again, I was 3 when Henry came along. He should only be a baby. The boy stared for a long time, then stood up. The screen around him seemed to flicker like heat waves coming off hot asphalt. I tried to look between the lines, but I couldn't pick up on anything. Just a glitch, I guess. I wish I knew who that kid was. Surely that wasn't Henry. I was sure it was some neighborhood kid or cousin I forgot about. Henry would have just been 1 at my 4th birthday. The next little while was just me opening presents and eating cake. I scanned occasionally for the little boy again, but I didn't see him. I also didn't see my infant brother. Why would he not be there? The next tape was one of Mom's. Many tapes of what I have dubbed world building. She filmed the front yard and talked about the cows and horses in the pasture beyond. She then scanned around looking through our yard and out toward the barn where my dad was spraying down his barrel race horse Shadow. She talked about how Dad was getting Shadow ready for the coming county fair and bragged about my riding lessons. He's getting strong even for a 7-year-old, she said proudly. I think he's out here somewhere. She walked around the back of the house and I heard the springs on the trampoline groaning under mine and Henry's weight. Hey bud, she called to me, pointing the camera at us. What's up? Just jumping with Henry. Look, I can backflip now. I demonstrated a semi-decent backflip and Henry clapped. Good job, Owen, Mom laughed. Look, Henry can do one too. Henry copied me and my mom said in a shaky voice. How did you do that? Do what? I asked, looking confused. It just looked like the trampoline was bouncing, but you weren't, she trailed. Well, yay Mom, cause Henry was jumping. I rolled my eyes and went back to my jumping. Henry wasn't joining me. He was staring off toward the camera and my mom. Weird. I heard her mumble and turn away. I remembered that day. I remember a little while later that Henry and I got into a fight and he pushed me off the trampoline. I sprained my wrist and wasn't able to ride at the county fair rodeo that Saturday. I remember asking him why he did it, but all I got was a smile and a shrug. Mom and I argued many times about Henry. I was super protective of him because he was so small. I knew Mom and Dad loved Henry. He was their son, but sometimes it felt as if they just tried to pretend he wasn't there. They were never mean to him though. My brain was scrambled. I dug around a little and found one I found interesting because it was labeled with a name I didn't recognize. Father Peters. We aren't Catholic. My dad is a proud Protestant. Why on earth would they have a video of someone named Father Peters? It was probably one of Mom's British soaps or something. I put the tape in and sat back on the floor, drawing my knees up to my chest. I was becoming more and more unnerved by all the things I couldn't remember. Okay, you said it's okay if I film this. Maggie films everything, grumbled Dad. She must have popped him lightly on the arm because he chuckled a little off to the side of the camera. The priest Father Peters, I assumed was sitting in our living room. Mom and Dad sat on the love seat adjacent to it. So, I don't really know how to say this, and I don't really know what is going on, but I think something is wrong with my son, Owen. I sat up a little, a stir in my gut. I don't remember being sick or anything. He has an imaginary friend. He calls him his brother, Henry. What does he say this imaginary friend looks like? The priest asked patiently. He has never described him, Dad answered. Like she said, he thinks he's his brother. I guess he thinks we should know what he looks like. The priest nodded. Do you feel like this Henry is malicious? Mom wrung her hands in her lap. There have been times when something would happen to Owen, or I would get onto him for doing something and he would say it was Henry. Henry pushed him off the trampoline, or Henry kicked the horse too hard and made him run off. I found him carving his and Henry's names in his bedside table with a knife once. He said Henry told him to. Father, I don't know what this is, but it doesn't feel normal. I've talked to my therapist and his doctor, and they keep trying to tell me this is normal for a little boy to have an imaginary friend. But you don't believe that is what is with your son? The priest finished. His hardened face was relaxing a little, seeing the apprehension in my mom's eyes. Dad took her hand. Look, I don't really believe in all that spooky stuff and monsters and all that. My dad sat forward, his broad shoulders slumping a little as he leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. I do know that something evil is in this house, has been for a while. I just want my family safe. The priest studied my parents for a moment, then nodded. I can pray over the house for now. I have other people I want involved, if you are willing to be open-minded. My mom immediately nodded, followed by my dad. I'll give you some instructions and get back with you as soon as I can. Where is Owen? School, Mom answered. He doesn't need to know about this until the absolute last minute. Please. No, I understand. I want to meet him soon. The camera fritzed a little. Something passed in front of the camera. It wasn't a person, but it looked like one. Just a passing wave of glitchy shadow. My mom and dad were standing up and moving around, but the priest's eyes were trained on the area to the left of the camera, his hardened appearance returning. As my parents turned around, he quickly muttered to himself and made the sign of the cross over his chest. Something he saw had scared him. I couldn't believe it. How do I not remember this priest? I must not have met him like he wanted. I was wrong. A moment of static, then a shot of our living room came into view. I was sitting at the table with Henry coloring. I was about 7 again. Hello, Owen, the priest's voice came from off camera, and he approached and sat across from me at the table. I heard my mom clear her throat on the other side of the camera. How have you been? Fine, I answered softly. Henry was looking between me and the father, his coloring page abandoned. Do you remember me from last week? Yes, I answered. I didn't sound right. I sounded scared. I was always a friendly kid, and never treated adults so nonchalantly. How has it been with your brother? He asked. Henry's eyes settled on me. He's good, I said. He's coloring with me, see? I pointed to the page in front of Henry. He didn't take his eyes off me. I see. Owen, is there anywhere we can go to talk without Henry? I just want to talk to you by yourself. Henry gets scared when I'm not there. I don't want him to be scared. What if he stays with your mom? Henry saw I was about to agree. I saw him reach over and pinch my leg. I grimaced and jumped a little. No, I don't want to. I want to stay right here, I said harshly. The priest nodded. Okay, that's fine. Did my prayers make him angry? Henry's small, frail little brother Henry cracked his neck, wincing as if the sound of the word was a hot iron. He doesn't believe in God. Really? What does he believe in? I shrugged. I don't know. He just says he doesn't need God. The priest chanced to look over at my mom, who I heard stifling a wet sigh. Do you believe in God, Owen? I knew, as my older self, I wasn't really into the idea of religion. I just wanted to believe things to be simple. Religions are politics these days, and I don't care for either one. My younger self, however, was a vacation Bible school kid, a Sunday night service kid, and a Tuesday afternoon kids choir kid. If it happened at the church, Mom had me there. I guess, I go to church with Mom and Dad. Does Henry go with you? I could see myself thinking hard, racking my brain to try and remember. I never saw him on Sunday mornings at VBS or a kids choir. I never saw him in the church. Henry was boring a hole into the side of my head. Yes, he does, he whispered to me. Yes, he does, I answered on the camera. My jaw dropped. Henry had just told me to lie. The tone with which I repeated his words was flat, not like my voice at all. The father looked at the empty seat beside me. He couldn't see him. The realization of years of my life being a facade crumbled around me. My breath hitched in my chest. He couldn't see him. Mom and Dad couldn't see him. He was invisible. A ghost? A rumble in my spirit deep inside me told me that this was more than just that. There wouldn't be a priest in our home for an invisible kid or a ghost. Just before the camera went off, Henry looked directly at the camera. I felt his eyes traveling through the lens, and through time to stare directly at me. I quickly ejected the tape, and felt myself starting to panic. I had so many good memories of my brother. Were they real? Did Henry put them there to make me forget? I don't even remember the video I just watched. I don't remember ever meeting Father Peters or any prayers he said in our house or some exorcist demonstration. I buried my head in my hands. The day Henry disappeared was muddy, but I could still see it. I had been talking to him about the Pokemon cards I was going to trade to my friend for a cigarette the next day, and we got to our stop. I stepped off the bus, but he didn't. I looked around for him, but he wasn't there. I know he was behind me. I could feel him right there behind me, walking down the steps. I ran home to see if he had taken off to the house, but he wasn't there. I told Mom and Dad about him being right behind me. Then he was gone. I wish Mom had been filming in this moment. I wish I could have looked at their faces again when I told them Henry was gone. I grinded my teeth. The missing posters. The phone call to the police. Did they do that to trick me? To make me think my little brother was really just missing so I would move on? I felt hot tears stinging my eyes. I was angry. Why didn't they just tell me? Then I said to myself, well, they probably did. You seem to have forgotten everything else. I trained my eyes back toward the box of tapes, feeling sick at the sight of them. At the bottom I discovered another small tape. This one, unlike all of them I had ever seen before, it was bare. No label or indication as to what was on it. After all I had seen, I was very nervous to see what some mysterious tape held. My foundation of beliefs had been cracked that day. I placed the tape into the adapter and prepared myself. Okay, hold on. I gotta remember how she uses it. My voice. I wasn't terribly old. 8 or 9. I was still a squeaker. This was right around the time Henry disappeared. After fumbling a little, I lifted the camera and trained it on Henry. A chill ran over my skin. I hated that my memory of him was so blemished now. He was my best friend for so long, and I loved him. Now his face made me feel like running away. Okay, Henry, tell the camera what you told me. What about? The story you told me. It's so cool and spooky. Henry blinked and looked down, then back up into the camera. Into my eyes almost 20 years later. I have no memory of this. Okay, well, a long time ago, when the animals and people were being made, a great big snake was creeping through the garden. He was sniffing for food and looking for friends to play with him when he came to a big lion. The lion told him no one wanted him in the garden, and he had to leave. I felt a little stir of familiarity. The snake was sad, but he slithered away. He tried again to come back, but the big lion told him to leave again. This time, the snake didn't leave. He waited until the lion was gone and went to the home. The man and lady who took care of all the animals in the garden. Hurry up, get to the scary part, my younger self urged him. I'm getting there, Henry said patiently, too patiently for a child who had been cut off during a story. He went to the woman and whispered in her ear while she slept. He told her the lion was trying to hurt her and she should never listen to him again. Then one day the snake heard crying in the garden. The lion was roaring at the woman and he made her bleed from her legs. I felt sick. The lion ran over and grabbed the snake with his teeth and threw him all the way down into a dark, dark hole. The snake was all alone, but he made new friends from other snakes that were thrown in the hole. He became a king and helped all the other snakes get back home. One day, really soon, the snake will come back and take all his other snakes home to fight the lion. Dude, snakes are so freaky, my younger self chuckled. How's a bunch of snakes gonna beat a lion though? Lions are pretty freaking strong. The look on Henry's face was cold, but he tilted the corner of his mouth upward and shrugged. Everything has a weak spot. The screen around Henry shifted again as it had before, but this time behind him was a mass of darkness. It towered over him and caused the tape to flicker a little. You weird me out sometimes, Hank. I laughed. That's a cool story though. I seemed to put the camera down quickly, obviously hearing my mother's footsteps coming down the stairs to the basement. I heard a hurried conversation offside, barely audible but just clear enough. What are you doing down here? I've told you to stay out. Me and Henry were just... Honey, stop trying to say Henry made you do things. He's not real. He is real. Why would you say that? On the screen, Henry was watching the conversation, a smirk on his face. It was alarming to look at. He looked back over to the camera and leaned in. Hey, Owen. I sat back away from the screen, feeling my skin crawling like spiders had been dumped over my head. Don't worry about what Mom says. I'm always gonna be with you. The video cut just as I heard my mother say, I'm calling Father Peters again. It must not have worked. I sat, staring at the blank static of the TV, the image of my brother baked into the background. A creak of wood behind me hitched my breath. I have no pets, no roommates, no one. I took a breath and stood slowly, making my way toward the front door. I had to get out of the house. Whatever Henry was, getting rid of him didn't work. I had to talk to my mom. I reached up and the door, there's no knob. I blinked quickly and looked back. No knob. What the fuck? I stammered, looking around. Where are you? I felt stupid, but I was sure I wasn't alone. I stumbled through the house toward the back door and I reached up and, come on, I screamed. No knob. I tried the windows. The locks wouldn't move. I tried to break them. They may have just as well been made of diamond. I slammed my boot into the door, trying to break the frame and set myself free, but all I got was a sore foot. A low, deep sound caused me to stop. It was like a sigh. I didn't want to turn around. Henry, I breathed out. Creak, creak, creak. Don't come any closer to me, I growled. What are you? Creak, creak, creak. Let me out, damn it. I'm not scared of you. My stutter didn't sound assuring, I know, but maybe showing resistance would help. It didn't. Pain deep, searing pain trickled down my spine. My back bowed and I hit my knees. Sounds filled my ears that could only be in my head. Screams, pleas, and the sounds of flames, licking flames. I could feel the heat of them just through the cracking and popping of them. My vision was flooded with writhing bodies, snakes' bodies, in the jaws of the largest snake, a lion, limp and lifeless. I felt my body disappear. I felt like I was in nothingness. Only for a split second, then I woke up on the floor, feeling my body aching and shivering. I turned as quickly as I could and looked around. The silence was deafening. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. I threw open the door, knob returned to its place, and ran toward my truck, desperate to drive as fast as I could away from whatever hell I had just been burdened with. I shouldn't have watched the tapes. I should have just let my brother be a memory that lived in my mind only. I knew I had to talk to Mom and Dad about this. Other people in my life must have noticed him there. Whatever he was, I didn't want him to stay. I didn't know what this was going to mean for me going forward, but I couldn't keep it to myself. If you knew me back then, please answer this question. Do you remember my brother Henry? My mother planted an unknown plant. Then she started going pale. My mother is very fond of gardening and loves planting flowering plants. We live in an area which is hot and humid, so the plants need diligent care. We have plants of many types and climates in our backyard which require special attention, including many roses and hibiscus plants. My maternal aunt loves to travel and has lived through her share of many unique experiences. She had just returned from her month-long trip to Europe. Knowing about my mom's fondness for flowering plants, she could not think of anything more perfect than the gift she was going to give her. The previous week she had come to visit us, and before leaving, handed my mom a plant. It had a weak pale greenish stem, droopy leaves, and a very small bud poking out. Here, Jay, I got this specially for you, she said excitedly. My mom, who looked concerned about the health of the plant, looked at it and replied with confusion in her voice, "Thanks, but what is this? It looks so weak. How will it possibly survive?" I got this from a forest in Romania, a wildflower maybe dot. There were many flowers blooming in a bush, and they looked so beautiful that I decided to give you one. Here I have taken a picture. Look. She scrolled up her gallery to show a picture. There was a bush, about 2 to 3 feet from the ground, with numerous vine-like creepers going into the soil, and on them were big flowers, dark red. The petals looked shiny and wet. Needless to say, my mom immediately fell in love with those flowers. Oh, I can't thank you enough. I feel this is what was missing from my garden all this time. She kissed her sister on the cheek. And that's how the plant made its way into the backyard. Our backyard area was full of exotic and indigenous plants that my mother grew, so automatically it attracted many birds and small animals. I used to feed them often with seeds and fruits. My mom planted the plant in a shady corner, under 2 other tall trees, so it received less light. The plant remained droopy the whole day. We thought that maybe it needed some time to adjust to its surroundings. I watered it in hopes of reviving it for a bit, but to no avail. It remained droopy as ever. That night, I was laying on my bed scrolling my phone when my eyes fell on the backyard through my window. The plant looked fresh. Weird, I thought to myself. I called my mother and showed her. She seemed overjoyed, but I could not shake off the weird feeling at the back of my mind. Over the next few days, the birds and animals coming to our yard had been drastically reduced. I used to feed them every day, but still they seemed to not come as much. It was not like there were predators in the area, but as if someone or something had been keeping them away. As the animals reduced, my mom had been frequenting her trips to the backyard. She used to take a long time tending to her plants even before, but now it seemed excessive. Her schedule had fully changed. Usually my father used to come home from work quite late and we used to have dinner together so as to spend some good family time. But my mom used to come so late from the backyard that even my father looked confused. One day he confronted her. "What are you doing in the backyard late at night? You didn't take so much time before." "I am just looking after my new plants," she said, while looking at the floor. Dad looked confused. Then he asked Mom to look up so that we could see her face. I was bewildered to look at her. Has she always been this pale? Her eyes looked tired, and she had a weird tense feeling on her face. "I don't know. I feel like I need to look after the plant a bit more," she muttered under her breath. The plant in that shady undergrowth looked much more plump and strong in the meantime. It had flowered. A single flower with 5 dark red petals. A single tube-like appendage in the middle. To attract flies maybe? I don't know. I used to stare out of my window at the plant. It was about 2 feet tall by now, spreading its long vines and leaves all over the area. I had noticed that the plant did not lose either a leaf or a petal over these few days. Usually flowers dry up within a few days, but this flower seemed to look healthy as ever. My mom was getting significantly paler now, so I offered to help her as she made some cookies. While mixing the ingredients on the countertop, I saw a small cut on her hand. "How did you get that cut? It looks kind of deep." "I don't remember exactly. Maybe from the rose bushes? They have big thorns." Well, in fact, she did get cut by her rose bushes a lot, but none looked this deep. "Do not worry, it doesn't hurt," she said, a tired smile spreading across her face, but it did not cease my anxiety. Every time I took a stroll in our garden, I could not shake off the feeling of dread whenever I approached that part of the yard. The atmosphere certainly did seem off since the plant had flowered. Whatever birds had been coming, everyone had left. There was an eerie silence. All the plants looked kind of disoriented. Everyone, except that one. It had grown bigger and wider, with its vine-like leaves and big red flowers. There were many flowers on the bush. The flowers did seem kind of beautiful. I could not seem to fathom how rapidly the whole plant grew. I carefully leaned closer to inspect the flowers. A very sweet, intoxicating smell seemed to come from them. I wanted to smell them. Those flowers. A deep red color. The color mixing into my vision with the smell. So beautiful. So fragrant. I moved in closer. "Cats!" It was my mom. She yelled my name. It seemed to break my trance. As I looked over my head to look at her, she looked awfully pale and angry, as if her eyes were glowing. I had never seen this type of a look on her face. "Cats, come here immediately. Do not touch the flowers I have grown so painstakingly." I backed off. I realized that whatever was happening due to these flowers. Accompanying my mom in the garden also made me learn quite some things about gardening, so I insisted on tending the plants that fateful day. Even if she seemed unconvinced, her weak health made her give in. "You can rest. I will water them today." I knew that I had to put an end to this commotion, today itself. The sun was setting and the sky was becoming dark with dimly lit stars. After watering and tending to all the other plants, I decided to finally save the one for last. I had grabbed an axe from the shed, determined to chop it off. As I came closer, I felt a sense of dread loom over me. That intoxicating smell, I had to prevent it from affecting myself. Tying a handkerchief to shield myself from inhaling those vapors, I brought down the axe right near its roots. Worse still, the plant seemed to know what I was doing. It let out a shrill, blood-curdling screech. It seemed more like a whistle rather than a screech, but I couldn't care less. I let down another blow. Then I noticed the flowers. The petals grew shorter and converged into small bulb-like membranes, and its appendages grew into needle-like structures. These needles pierced and went deep underneath my skin, giving me excruciating pain. I could feel these needles digging deep into my flesh and sucking the life out of me, and meanwhile the membrane-like sacs filling with what appeared to be my blood. I pushed through the pain and whacked the stalks of the flowers all together. The needles withdrew from underneath my skin as it screeched with its horrible whistling sound, and I did not stop whacking my axe until there were bits and pieces of the plant left. I gathered them all in a plastic bag and threw them deep into the jungle beyond, and then finally heaved a sigh of relief. I was questioned by my concerned family when I narrated the incident. I assumed that they wouldn't believe me until my mother revealed that she had been attracted by the smell of that plant too. Finally, when her trance broke, she felt pain on her wrist but could not exactly figure out why. As of now, my mother has started recovering, and she now feels healthy enough to tend to her beloved plants in the garden. We dug a hole in the spot where the plant used to be and spread some weed killers and chemicals, hoping that none of it grows again. The animals have been returning, and it all feels lighthearted again. Until one day I caught a glimpse of something right in that spot, something deep and red. That's it for tonight's stories, but the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.